Chapter 1134. However, Dao being lone soul had an evil nature and made a comeback. He released many ferocious goo worms that wreaked havoc and caused countless living beings to die. The old man's tone was sinister. If we allow the goo worms to continue wreaking havoc, the entire world will be reduced to a grave, let alone our city. A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. It was clear that the old man was extremely proficient in this and could manipulate everyone's emotions. Many things sounded as though they were personally experienced when he spoke of them. What should we do? Someone in the crowd could not help but ask. The old man was neither anxious nor slow as the gavel in his left hand fell. With a thud, he changed the topic. At that critical moment, a woman stood out. That woman is practically the reincarnation of a medical immortal. She was capable of miraculous rejuvenation and did not sleep or rest. She spent endless effort to refine elixirs and fuse them into the rain, causing the rain to descend and save the world. The old man's description of the witch goo calamity was filled with ups and downs that tugged at one's heartstrings. Of course, the old man did not say much about the battle at Misty Peak and the battle in the capital of Great Zhou and merely mentioned it briefly. A long time later, the old man finished speaking and stroked his long beard. Nodding with a smile, he fanned himself with a relaxed expression. However, a series of discussions sounded in the crowd. I see. No wonder a few days ago, the rain suddenly descended from the sky. So, it was because of the medical immortal. That's right. I saw it with my own eyes. Little Six from next door was about to die. After drinking a few mouthfuls of rain, he gradually recovered and is already jumping around. Everyone was excited and discussed fervently. TSK, what medical immortal? You make it sound so mysterious. Someone in the crowd harumphed softly in disdain. What did you say? Everyone glared at him. That person was shocked. How could he have expected that a casual remark of his would actually cause such a huge reaction? Everyone's expressions were as though they wanted nothing more than to tear him apart. This kind of bizarre story is just a story that the storyteller spouts without thinking. How could it possibly be true? The man swallowed hard and began to feel a bit guilty. His voice grew softer and softer. How is it not real? Someone shouted immediately, everything else aside, the medical immortal is definitely real. Not bad. Another person said, the immortal doctor has been here before and saved many people. We all saw it with our own eyes. Only the immortal doctor has such means, such a bodhisattva's heart, such a benevolent heart. Everyone voiced their opinions one after another, without the slightest bit of doubt. The man's face was pale, and he could only leave with his tail between his legs. Just as the crowd was about to continue listening, they discovered that the storyteller had already disappeared. No one saw how the old man left or where he went. In the sky, the old man sat leisurely on the clouds. Su Zimo hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. I am Araki Takashi. Greetings, senior. This old man was none other than the one he had seen in the capital of the Great Zhou dynasty over 100 years ago, the one who had single-handedly blocked the dragons. Senior, why are you here? Su Zimo could not help but ask curiously. This old man came from the Enigma Palace. However, the people of Enigma Palace did things strangely. Given the old man's cultivation and combat strength, he was already at the peak of Tianhuang mainland. Yet, he was toying with the mortal world and came to a city in the north region to tell a story in a methodical manner. How was my story? The old man asked with a smile. It was fascinating. Su Zimo chuckled as well. The old man nodded. Actually, there's nothing bad about the matters of the cultivation world being passed down. This is especially so for someone like Su Xiaoning. Such a huge merit should be remembered by the world. Such matters would be recorded in the annals of the cultivation world. However, mortals would not have the chance to come into contact with it. As for the old man, he roamed the north region and spread this matter in the form of a storyteller. If these stories were passed down for generations, there might still be people who would remember it many years later. The old man's expression turned serious. I was initially in seclusion, but I had a sudden impulse. When I came out of seclusion to take a look, I realized that the north region was filled with resentment and was lifeless. I knew that something big happened in the north region, so I rushed over. By the time I arrived, you guys had already resolved it. That's good. The old man asked with a smile. Actually, you played a huge role in the Witch Goo calamity this time round as well. However, just now, I didn't mention it much. Do you know why? Su Zimo shook his head. The old man looked at Su Zimo with deep anticipation in his eyes. That's because you have even greater merit. You're a Raki Takashi and you want to establish a Tao for all living beings. That's the true fortune of all living beings and the human race. Don't worry, Senior. I'll definitely do my best and not let you down. Su Zimo cupped his fists with a resolute gaze. Good, good, good. The old man repeated the word, good, thrice and nodded. I'll wait for that day. After a brief pause, the old man's gaze shifted and landed on Night Spirit. The old man's eyes suddenly widened. Is this the little black dog that followed you around back then? The old man suddenly asked. Yes. Su Zimo gave a short reply. Enigma Palace was known to be able to divine the mysteries of the world without missing anything. Naturally, something as such could not be hidden from the old man before him. It did not matter as long as the old man did not recognize Night Spirit's race. Just as Su Zimo was pondering, the old man suddenly said two words. Earth-shattering. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he jumped in fright. Night Spirit's gaze turned cold and he nearly lost control of himself and attacked the old man. Taboo! The old man suddenly said those two words. Su Zimo's expression changed in shock. Night Spirit did not reveal his true form, but the old man still saw through his identity. Back when Night Spirit was still a little black dog, even the old man could not tell his background. But now he was still exposed. As expected of a primordial taboo. Your killing intent is way too strong. The old man's tone was calm and indifferent. He chuckled. You want to attack me after hearing that I exposed your identity? Night Spirit was expressionless and merely glared at the old man coldly. In Night Spirit's heart, apart from Su Zimo and a few others, there was no one in this world that he could not kill. Senior, Night Spirit. The moment Su Zimo spoke, he was interrupted by the old man with a wave of his hand. The old man said, Don't worry. As long as he doesn't reveal his true form, not many people can see through his background. However, the old man changed the topic and looked deeply at Night Spirit again. Without continuing, he flicked his sleeves and left, saying indifferently, Take care of yourself. In the blink of an eye, the old man vanished. It was only at this moment that Su Zimo and Night Spirit heaved a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, the two of them broke out in cold sweat. It was only at this moment that Su Zimo realized what was going on. The moment he found out about Night Spirit's background, the old man's killing intent was definitely triggered. To think that a void reversion like Night Spirit would cause an existence like the old man of Enigma Palace to be wary and even want to kill the latter. If Night Spirit had dared to make a move, he would have been a corpse by now. However, later on, the old man seemed to have thought of something and held himself back. Chapter 1135. When Su Zimo and Night Spirit returned to Great Zhou from Gu Sect, they passed by some ancient cities that were originally part of Great Yu. However, they discovered that the flags of Great Zhou had been changed one after another. Some of the vassal states of Great Yu submitted as well. Su Zimo specially took a detour and entered the territories of Great Xia and Great Shang. He discovered that the situation was not only limited to the territory of Great Yu. Many vassal states of Great Xia and Great Shang had submitted as well. Su Zimo pondered for a moment and guessed the reason. The calamity of the witchcraft Gu this time round caused the living beings of the north region to suffer. In particular, the impact on the four dynasties was immense and many vassal states were destroyed as a result. As for the four dynasties, they were also in a precarious situation because of this calamity. The Great Zhou dynasty had Su Zimo and his sister. In the battle in the capital, they suppressed most of the cultivation forces of the three dynasties. The emperors of the three dynasties had already stayed in the capital of Great Zhou and swore oaths to bow down to the empress of Great Zhou, Jiaoshua. After this news was spread, the three dynasties were bound to fall into chaos. Coupled with the calamity of the witchcraft Gu, the three dynasties collapsed rapidly. At that moment, Xiaoning made a move and countless cultivators of Great Zhou headed to various parts of Great Zhou's territory to summon rain to resolve the calamity of the witchcraft Gu. The name of the fairy doctor spread throughout the north region. Naturally, the vassal states of the three dynasties submitted one after another. Once such a situation erupted, even if the three dynasties had the Dharma Daojun holding down the fort, it would be useless. That's good as well. Looking at the ground beneath his feet, Su Zimo murmured softly. If the Great Zhou dynasty could make use of this opportunity to annex the other three dynasties and form a new dynasty, there would be fewer wars in the north region. That was a good thing for all living beings in the world. After the calamity of the witchcraft Gu, the living beings of the north region needed a chance to recuperate and could no longer endure the flames of war. After returning to the Great Zhou dynasty's royal city, Su Zimo met with Ji Yaoshua. That day, he had arrived in time to resolve the crisis of the Great Zhou Empire and then rushed to Misty Peak. The two of them did not have time to talk. Just as Su Zimo had expected, although Ji Yaoshua was a woman, she was not inferior to men. Her heart was filled with mountains and rivers. She did not let go of this opportunity. She planned out her strategy and decided victory from 1,000 miles away. She befriended those far away and attacked those near. She worked together and continuously swallowed up the territories of the three great dynasties. The Great Zhou dynasty had finally reached its peak under her rule. Xiaoning continued to refine elixirs in the capital. The destruction of 10,000 Gu swamp was the same as cutting off the source of Gu worms. Over the past month, the witchcraft Gu disaster had already stabilized. She no longer needed to refine pills day and night without rest. Ning's condition is getting better. Su Zimo returned to Misty Peak to catch up with old friends like the old immortal Crane and Nian Qi. There were not many old friends left from back then. Even Su Zimo's first master, the disheveled old man of Weapon Peak, passed away on Weapon Peak after his lifespan was depleted a few years ago. However, even at the end of his life, the disheveled old man had a smile on his face. Every disciple of Misty Peak knew that the number one of the phenomenon ranking, the once invincible monster incarnate of the North region, Su Zimo, was his disciple. Although Ethereal Peak had suffered some losses after that battle, it was clear that they had become stronger. This was equivalent to being reborn from the ashes after surviving two calamities. Right now, Nian Qi was still the one with the greatest potential in Misty Peak. Nian Qi possessed the bloodline of the Protoss and had a long lifespan. Even though more than 100 years had passed, Nian Qi did not seem to have changed much as she stood quietly behind Su Zimo like a young girl. After Nian Qi advanced to the Void Reversion realm, her status in Misty Peak was second only to the old immortal Crane. She was extremely beautiful and possessed terrifying combat strength that could even fight against the old immortal Crane. As such, she was crowned as the goddess of Misty Peak by many disciples. During this period of time, Su Zimo's return broke the hearts of many Misty Peak disciples. That was because the sacred and inviolable goddess in their hearts was actually following Su Zimo around daily like a maidservant, doing chores that a child should do. In the eyes of many disciples, this was a blasphemy against the goddess. However, Nian Qi was indifferent. In her heart, Su Zimo had an extremely important position that nobody could replace. This time round, Su Zimo was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he entered seclusion in Misty Peak and continued cultivating. Firstly, he was worried that some sect or faction would come looking for trouble with the Great Zhou dynasty or Misty Peak. After all, in the Witch Gu calamity, not only did he and Night Spirit kill the young master of the witch race and the blind old man, they even killed the Dharma Daojun of Dragon Tiger sect and more than 100 void reversions here. Secondly, he had been tempered by the primordial divine spring in Gu sect, and Qinglian's true body had yet to refine all the energy in the divine spring. If he could refine all the energy, he might be able to cultivate to the peak of late-stage void reversion realm. A year later, Su Zimo broke out of seclusion. At the entrance of his cave abode, a flawless young girl stood there. Her eyes were blue, her nose was straight and her skin was smooth like a porcelain doll. "Young master." The young girl called out crisply. It was Nianqi. "Young master, your cultivation has improved again." Nianqi shifted his gaze and swept it across Su Zimo. He could sense that Su Zimo's aura had risen tremendously in just a year. "Yes." Su Zimo smiled gently and nodded. As he had expected, he had already absorbed the power of the divine spring that was fused into Qinglian's true body in a year, and his cultivation had already reached the peak of late-stage void reversion realm. He was only a step away from breaking through to the perfected void reversion realm. Did anything happen in Great Zhou in the past year? Standing in front of his cave abode, Su Zimo looked down at the mountains and forests beneath him and asked softly. "Nothing much," Nianqi said. "The Great Xia, Great Yu and Great Shang dynasties have been completely destroyed. Great Zhou has already annexed the territories of the three dynasties and its strength is still rising." "All right," Su Zimo nodded. After pondering for a moment, he asked again, "Did the Dharma Daojun of the three dynasties appear? Did the descendants of their royal families try to take revenge?" For the past year, he had been guarding Misty Peak. The reason why Night Spirit was guarding the capital of Great Zhou was because he was worried that something like this would happen. "No," Nianqi shook his head. "This is the trend of the times. Even if they're indignant, it's useless." There were almost no obstacles in the process of annexing the three dynasties. It can be said that the people have their hearts set on it. "Is there any news from Dragon Tiger sect?" Su Zimo asked again. "Nothing either," Nianqi shook his head. Pausing for a moment, as though she recalled something, she suddenly said, "By the way, I heard that there will be a grand gathering in the cultivation world of the North region in a few days called the North Region Dao Meet. The reason why it's called a Dao Meet is because those who can participate in it are all void reversions of the North region and Dharma Daojun. It's said that the 10 upper sects of the North region and the various cultivation aristocratic families will be present as well." Chapter 1136. North Region Dao Meet? When he heard that, Su Zimo's expression was calm and he did not have much of a reaction, merely murmuring softly. Nianqi continued, "It's a gathering for void reversions and Dharma Daojun of the North region to spar, interact, and even trade. I heard that it's also for the sake of preparing for the Dharma characteristic ranking in the near future. For cultivators, such a massive event was definitely a rare opportunity. As long as they participated in the event, even if they did not spar, they could watch from the sidelines and familiarize themselves with the techniques of other cultivators. If they could spar, corroborate and interact with one another, their comprehension of heaven and earth, dharmic arts and cultivation would be even deeper. Some cultivators were stuck at bottlenecks and might not be able to break through for hundreds or even thousands of years. However, at this event, they might be enlightened and find an opportunity to break through with a single sentence from someone else. Furthermore, the void reversions and Dharma Daojun of the North region were gathered at this event. In reality, this event was a rare trade market. If some cultivators needed treasures or natural treasures, other cultivators might have them. Both parties could exchange items and treasures. Will the cultivators of Glass Palace be there? After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo suddenly asked. "I think so," Nianqi said. "Even if Glass Palace is one of the immortal sects, they shouldn't miss out on such a rare event." Su Zimo narrowed his eyes as a cold glint flashed through them. There was something that was still lingering in his heart. Xuanyu Daoran of Glass Palace. He was the culprit behind the destruction of the 13 cities of Yen country. Back in the Great Qian ruins, Xuanyu Daoran was the one who shattered Su Zimo's Jin Dan and forced him to jump into the Dragon Burial Valley. It was also Xuanyu Daoran who stole the treasure that Little Fox treasured like her life, the fire-blocking basket. The feud between the two of them was extremely deep. The feud between Su Zimo and Glass Palace was also because of Xuanyu Daoran. There would definitely be a battle to the death between the two of them. "Shen Yu, I wonder if I should address you as a Dao being or Dao Lord after more than 100 years, Su Zimo murmured softly with killing intent in his eyes. "Shen Yu might still be a void reversion after more than 100 years. Of course, There was also the possibility that he could become a Dharma characteristic. Be it void reversion or Dharma Daoren, Xianyu had a high chance of participating in the North Region Dao meet. Not only that, but that was also the Dharma Daoren sect. It was also the Dharma Daoren. At this moment, two figures appeared in the distance. They stepped on clouds and sped towards this place. In the blink of an eye, it was already right in front of him. One of them was dressed in black robes and had a chiseled face. His eyes were deep and his expression was cold. It was Night Spirit. The other person was tall and burly. He had a head full of golden hair that grew in curls. His beard was also golden, and it was connected to his hair. That person's chest was bare and his hair was exuberant as well, looking extremely rough. Su Zimo was stunned for a moment when he saw the golden-haired man. Immediately, he was overjoyed and could not help but laugh. 7 Long time no see. The golden-haired man was none other than the Golden Lion who was sworn brothers with Su Zimo, Night Spirit, and the others. Among the 7 of them, the Golden Lion was ranked last, 7th. The Golden Lion was excited as well when it caught sight of Su Zimo. First, the two of them dispersed the auspicious clouds and landed. The Golden Lion shouted. Su Zimo went forward and punched the Golden Lion in the chest, scolding jokingly, "You sure are happy on your own. You went to look for your lover. You haven't seen us for more than 100 years. Back in Myriad Phenomenon City, Su Zimo and the others planned to head to Thousand Demon Valley. However, the Golden Lion decided to return to Wild Lion Ridge in the North Region because he was worried about his lover. It had been more than 100 years since the 7 of them parted. I remember as well. Night Spirit was happy to reunite with his brothers as well and teased, "I think your lover's name is Cacao or something. She's really nice to you, heh." The Golden Lion lowered its head slightly and rubbed its furry palms, smiling embarrassedly. Su Zimo frowned slightly. Others might not be able to tell, but he could vaguely sense that the Golden Lion seemed to have something on its mind. At the very least, the Golden Lion did not have the same expression as before when Cacao was mentioned. On the contrary, a hint of pain, anger, and helplessness flashed through the Golden Lion's eyes. Of course, that expression was fleeting. Coupled with the fact that the Golden Lion lowered its head, Su Zimo did not manage to see it clearly. The brothers were overjoyed to be reunited after a long time and did not think too much about it. "Why are the two of you together?" Su Zimo asked with a smile. "I was bored in the capital, so I came here to take a look," Night Spirit said, "to think that I would sense someone spying on us the moment I arrived at the entrance of Misty Peak." When he heard that, Su Zimo laughed. In this world, there were not many people who could hide from Night Spirit's senses. Even the disciples of Hidden Death Sect who were best at concealment could not do it. Night Spirit pointed at the Golden Lion and continued, "I sneaked over to take a look and saw him. If it wasn't for his yellow hair, I would have killed him." This was not a joke. It was simply too easy for Night Spirit to kill someone without anyone noticing. Fufu. The Golden Lion laughed foolishly. Night Spirit suddenly appeared like a ghost and gave me a fright. "You still have the cheek to say that." Night Spirit said, "What were you thinking about standing in the forest in a daze?" "Nothing much." The Golden Lion rubbed his hands and lowered his head instinctively. His voice was much softer as well. "Nothing much." This time round, Su Zimo was not the only one. Even Night Spirit and Nian Qi had noticed the abnormality with the Golden Lion. The 3 of them exchanged glances and did not say anything. When Su Zimo saw that the Golden Lion was travel-worn and fatigued, he patted the latter on the shoulder. "Let's go. Don't just stand here. Let's sit in the cave abode and drink some wine and talk." "Yes." The Golden Lion nodded. The 4 of them headed towards the cave abode. After taking a few steps, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he glanced sideways. Previously, none of them noticed that the Golden Lion was standing on the auspicious cloud. However, as they walked, he noticed that the Golden Lion's footsteps were not agile and his feet were uneven. Although the Golden Lion was trying to control himself, his legs were clearly limping. Night Spirit exclaimed softly. He had noticed that as well. Almost at the same time, Su Zimo and Night Spirit stopped in their tracks and turned around. Both of them looked solemn as they looked at the golden lion with bright eyes. "What's going on?" Su Zimo's voice was cold as he asked in a deep voice. The golden lion grit his teeth, as though he wanted to say something. However, after hesitating for a long time, he sighed and lowered his head. Chapter 1137. "It's nothing." The golden lion lowered its head and wanted to continue walking forward but was held back by Su Zimo. "What's going on?" Su Zimo glared at the golden lion and his tone turned harsher. The golden lion did not dare to meet Su Zimo's gaze and merely replied in a low, muffled voice, "It's just a fight with someone. I lost because I was not as strong as him." Although the golden lion said it simply, Su Zimo knew that there must be more to it. Otherwise, the golden lion would not have revealed such an expression. His eyes were filled with anger and conflict. It was clear that he had something on his mind. "Who did this?" Night Spirit's gaze was cold and his tone was murderous. The moment the Night Spirit was born in Misty Peak, he did not have any clansmen. He had always treated Su Zimo and the others as his family. Although the Golden Lion King had met him later, they had fought side by side before. They were sworn brothers. Now that he saw how severely injured the Golden Lion was, Night Spirit's killing intent was aroused. At their cultivation realm, the Golden Lion was a pure-blooded ferocious beast with a strong bloodline and shocking regeneration abilities. Even if his leg was broken, he would be able to recover fully after recuperating for a period of time. But now, the Golden Lion was limping and was crippled. One could imagine how badly his leg was injured back then. The Golden Lion still had its head lowered and remained silent. However, Su Zimo and the others could tell from the Golden Lion's eyes that he was struggling internally. "7, what are you afraid of? What can't you say?" Night Spirit frowned and asked again. "It's not that I can't say it. It's useless even if I say it." The Golden Lion laughed bitterly. "I know that you guys want to help me. But, let's forget about this." "You're afraid of implicating us?" Raising his brow, Su Zimo asked, "Tell me who the other party is and how big of a background they have." The Golden Lion hesitated for a moment and his eyes were filled with endless rage at the thought of that person. Finally, he could not hold it in and grit his teeth. "He's from the Yuan family." "Yuan family?" Su Zimo had an indifferent expression. "The Yuan family of the 4 gentry clans?" There were 4 gentry clans in the North region that were comparable to the 10 upper sections. They were powerful and had deep foundations. Back in the battle at the Great Qian Ruins, Su Zimo had interacted with all the sects and factions of the North region. "Yes. The Golden Lions to Su Zimo's to the Wild Lion Ridge for 100 years and it was safe and sound. 10 years ago, I heard the news of my first brother at the 1,000 Crane Tea Party in the Middle Continent and missed him. Therefore, I discussed with Cacao and prepared to head to the Middle Continent to look for you guys. However, not long after we left the Wild Lion Ridge, we met that person, Yuan Wushuang. At the mention of that person, apart from anger and hatred, there was also fear and helplessness in the Golden Lion's eyes. Cacao is a mutated species of the Golden Lion race. Her entire body is pure gold and she's extraordinary. When Yuan Wushuang saw Cacao, he wanted to take her as his mount. The Golden Lion paused for a moment and sighed softly. He's way too strong. Although we're all at the Void Reversion realm, we can't even last 10 moves against him even if we join forces. When they heard that, Su Zimo and Night Spirit were calm. In their eyes, void reversions were no longer a threat. Nian Qi said naturally as well, "There's no need to worry about void reversions. With young master's help, we can snatch Cacao back at any time." The Golden Lion laughed bitterly and shook his head. "You guys haven't fought him so you don't know how strong he is. If Big Brother wasn't crippled by a half-martial ancestor, he might have been able to suppress him. Now that Big Brother has lost his body, the Divine Phoenix Bone and the Creation Qinglian, he's definitely not a match for him." In the battle in the capital of Great Zhou, the cultivators of the 3 dynasties were either dead or injured. Those who survived had already submitted to Ji Yaoshua. As for the battle at Misty Peak, the cultivators of Dragon Tiger sect were completely wiped out. These two battles were not witnessed by any outsiders. The cultivation world of the North region only vaguely received some news that Dao Bing Araki Takashi had returned. However, not many people knew the details of the two battles. The outside world still thought that Dao Bing Araki Takashi had fallen from his pedestal and vanished from the masses. Even the Golden Lion thought so. After all, many cultivators witnessed his body being crippled by a half-martial ancestor and the destruction of the creation Qinglian. The Golden Lion said, Yuan Wushuang is known as the #1 genius in the history of the Yuan clan. His talent is heaven-defying and he is blessed with fortune. He has obtained countless immortal opportunities and is known as the #1 Dao being of the North region. Oh, in that case, he does have some capabilities. Su Zimo nodded and said indifferently. One of the immortal sects, Glass Palace, was located in the North region. The fact that Yuan Wushuang was known as the #1 Dao being of the North region meant that his combat strength surpassed many successors of Glass Palace. That was indeed not easy. However, those titles were nothing in Su Zimo's eyes. Who were the void reversions that died in his hands 10 years ago? They were the titular disciples of the super sects. Di'in was known as the human emperor, but what happened in the end? No matter how strong Yuan Wushuang was, could he compare to Di'in? Su Zimo did not explain and asked again, what happened after that? He broke your leg after abducting Cacao? No, the Golden Lion shook its head. At that time, I was severely injured and almost died. Thankfully, I obtained a treasure in the ancient battlefield that saved my life. By the time I woke up, Yuan Wushuang was already gone. Half a year later, I recuperated and snuck into the Yuan clan. However, Yuan Wushuang bumped into me and suppressed me. If not for Cacao's plea, I would have died 9 years ago. At the mention of this, the Golden Lion's eyes were still filled with indescribable pain. Not many people would be able to bear watching their beloved plead for mercy in front of their enemy. The Golden Lion grit its teeth. Yuan Wushuang said that I can avoid death, but I can't escape punishment. In order to teach me a lesson, he shattered all the bones in my right leg. They were smashed into pieces the size of fingernails. He even severed my tendons and cut them into pieces. At that point, the Golden Lion's voice trembled and its eyes were bloodshot with a hateful expression. It was as though it had returned to that night 9 years ago. He would never forget how Yuan Wushuang had stepped on him and looked down at his face from a high vantage point. He would never forget the disdain and mockery in Yuan Wushuang's eyes. He would never forget Yuan Wushuang's demonic voice. Little lion, I'm going to make you remember to never provoke me. This time around, I'm only crippling one of your legs to teach you a lesson. Next time, I'm going to shatter every single bone in your body. He would never forget how Cacao knelt at Yuan Wushuang's feet and cried loudly, begging for mercy on his behalf. Every single scene was like a sharp blade that was stabbed into his chest, and the pain was unbearable. 9 years of heart-wrenching pain had tormented this lofty man to the point of cowardice, and he no longer had the vigor of the past. Nianqi's eyes were red as he turned his head away, unable to bear to look at the Golden Lion. Su Zimo's expression was cold as he patted the Golden Lion's arm gently and said in a sinister tone, "Stop talking. Leave tomorrow and follow me to the North Region Dao meet." Chapter 1138. The next morning, Su Zimo and the others bade farewell to the old immortal crane and left Misty Peak. There were not many people in their group. There were only Su Zimo, Night Spirit, Golden Lion, and Nianqi. Actually, Su Zimo did not intend to bring Nianqi along. However, he could not withstand Nianqi's coaxing. On second thought, Nianqi had half the bloodline of the Protoss after all and was already at the Void Reversion realm. Even against the Dharma Daojun, he could protect himself. Furthermore, there was him and Night Spirit. They boarded a spirit vessel controlled by Night Spirit and disappeared from the skies above Misty Peak before long. Not long after they left, the Golden Lion was still feeling uneasy. First, Night Spirit, I know that you guys want to help me and can't take this lying down. However, there are many experts gathered at the North Region Dao meet. You guys can't risk your lives for me. The Golden Lion said with a troubled expression, Yuan Wushuang is backed by the Yuan clan, who is on good terms with other sects and factions. The four of us have no chance of winning at all. Also, I heard that there are many Dharma Daojun gathered at the North Region Dao meet. Let's not go. 7th, why have you become so timid? Night Spirit teased. The Golden Lion blushed and argued hurriedly, I'm not timid. It's fine even if I die. I'm just worried that I'll implicate you guys. Don't think too much, Su Zimo waved it off. I'm not heading to the North Region Dao meet just for your matter. I have other things to do. The Golden Lion was stunned. Su Zimo explained, a year ago, cultivators of Dragon Tiger sect interfered in the Witch Gu calamity. I haven't gotten an explanation from them yet. Also, I have a deep feud with Glass Palace's Xuanyu Daoren. I'm going to see if I can bump into him. Even without you, I would have headed to the North Region Dao meet. Seemingly still worried, the Golden Lion added, first, you have to be careful at the North Region Dao meet. Don't be rash. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Su Zimo smiled faintly. The Golden Lion thought for a moment and transformed into its true form on the spirit vessel. It kept shrinking until it was about half the height of a human. The originally majestic and ferocious Golden Lion now looked like a harmless pet. The reason why the Golden Lion did that was because it was worried that it would cause Su Zimo unnecessary trouble. That was because after cultivating to fiend demons, they could take on human form and it was difficult for cultivators to see through them. Therefore, in the cultivation world, if a fiend demon was discovered in human form, they would be surrounded and killed by cultivators immediately. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying it would be for a fiend demon in human form to be sandwiched in the middle of many cultivators. All the cultivators instinctively thought that the fiend demon was up to no good and had ulterior motives. If a fiend demon were to transform into its true form and shrink to the size of a pet, other cultivators would know that the fiend demon was a cultivator's mount or spirit pet. If it was 10 years ago, the Golden Lion would not have cared about such small details. Su Zimo would not have minded either. However, in the past 10 years, the Golden Lion had experienced too much and had become cautious. He was afraid that Su Zimo and Night Spirit would suffer a calamity like Cacao and leave him because of him. Night Spirit opened his mouth slightly, as though he wanted to say something. However, he swallowed it back. Both he and Su Zimo knew that the Golden Lion had a knot in his heart and it would be useless even if others tried to persuade him. If he wanted to resolve this knot, he could only rely on Yuan Wushuang. Night Spirit controlled the spirit vessel and sped for an entire day and night before leaving the territory of Great Zhou. After the Great Zhou dynasty annexed the Great Xia, Great Shang and Great Yu dynasties, its territory was several times larger than before. Of course, the Great Zhou dynasty was far from being an empire. Its strength was far from the Great Qin Empire of 10,000 years ago. That was because there were no super sects in the territory of Great Zhou. Not to mention super sects, there weren't even factions like the 10 upper sects or the gentry families. Back then, the Great Qin Empire had 2 super sects holding down the fort. For it to be called an empire, it had to possess absolute dominance in a large region, and the Great Zhou dynasty was far from that. The moment the spirit vessel left the territory of Great Zhou, another spirit vessel appeared not far away from them. It left Great Zhou and sped alongside the spirit vessel of Su Zimo and the others. The spirit vessel was majestic and domineering. A single look was enough to tell that it was extraordinary. Compared to the spirit vessel opposite, the one that Su Zimo and the others were on was much simpler. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to the gigantic spirit vessel opposite. 6 people stood at the bow of the vessel, 3 young people, 2 men and a woman. Behind the 3 young people were 2 middle-aged men. The gigantic spirit vessel was controlled by another old man in plain clothes. The old man looked ordinary. However, Su Zimo was shrewd and experienced. He had interacted too many times with such cultivators and could sense that the old man was a Dharma Daojun even without using his spirit consciousness. It was not only the old man, even the 2 middle-aged men behind the 3 young people were Dharma Daojun. It was rather strange to bump into 3 Dharma Daojun in the vicinity. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he narrowed his eyes as though he had thought of something. His gaze landed on the three young people. Among the three young people, there were two men and a woman. The two men were at the nascent soul realm while the woman was at the void reversion realm. The two men were handsome and wore brocade robes, looking extremely noble. The woman in the middle was beautiful and dignified. She wore a moon-white Taoist robe and was tall with a voluptuous figure. Her hair was as black as ink and draped behind her head, swaying gently. A few strands of black hair brushed past her beautiful face, fiddling with the worry in her eyes. The three young people had unique auras and Su Zimo already had a guess about their backgrounds. At that moment, the six people on the gigantic spirit vessel noticed Su Zimo as well. The old man was focused on setting up the spirit vessel the entire time and did not turn back. The two middle-aged Dharma characteristic cultivators merely glanced at Su Zimo and the others. When they realized that they were only void reversions, they did not pay much attention and retracted their gazes. On the other hand, the beautiful woman took a few more glances over. The beautiful woman's gaze swept past Su Zimo and the other three before landing on Su Zimo. Turning around, she cupped her fists with a smile and asked loudly, "Fellow Taoist, where are you going?" "North Region Tao Meet," Su Zimo replied. "Ah," the beautiful woman laughed and invited with a sincere expression, "That's great. We're going to the North Region Tao Meet as well. Why don't we travel together and have a seat here?" Night Spirit pursed his lips disapprovingly. The four of them were close and naturally did not want to bother with strangers. Night Spirit had just opened his mouth and was about to reject when Su Zimo chuckled and agreed readily. "Sure." A hint of doubt flashed through the eyes of Night Spirit and the other two. This did not seem like Su Zimo's style of doing things. However, the three of them realized that there must be a reason for this. Therefore, they remained silent and waited to see what would happen. Chapter 1139. Su Zimo's group of four landed on the gigantic spirit vessel of the other party. The spirit vessel was extremely sturdy and there were many formation patterns etched on the surface of the vessel. It was clear that it was created by a master. On the spirit vessel, it was even more majestic. Many of the buildings were made of pure gold. There was a sandalwood table at the bow of the vessel with many spirit fruits and immortal peaches on it. There was even a steaming pot of fragrant tea. "Fellow Taoist, please take a seat." The elegant woman did not look at anyone else and merely extended an invitation to Su Zimo alone. The beautiful woman knew what was going on. Although she had only met them briefly, she could roughly guess the status of the four of them. Among the four of them, it was clear that the green-robed cultivator before her was the leader. Although the golden-haired girl behind the green-robed cultivator was beautiful, she was half a status behind the green-robed cultivator and should be a maidservant. The golden lion should be the green-robed cultivator's spirit pet or mount. The golden lion was a pure-blooded ferocious beast. To be able to subdue a golden lion that was at the void reversion realm, that was not something that ordinary people could do. As for the black-robed man who was controlling the spirit vessel earlier on, there was a high chance that he was a servant or something. In the cultivation world, it was normal for those who had cultivated to the void return realm to have some servants. After all, it was impossible for void reversions to nurture spirit herbs, rear spirit beasts or handle miscellaneous matters personally. In reality, although her guess was a little off, she was right about the person. Among the four of them, Su Zimo was indeed the leader. Su Zimo did not decline and sat down right away. Looking around, he praised, "Fellow Taoist, this spirit vessel is really not bad." Sitting here while feeling the warm breeze, eating immortal fruits, sipping hot tea, and gazing at the magnificent mountains and rivers was a form of enjoyment of its own. When the two men saw Su Zimo's expression, disdain flashed through their eyes. Where did this country bumpkin come from? He hasn't even seen a spirit vessel as such. I wonder how he managed to cultivate to the void reversion realm. The two of them sneered internally. Despite their disdain, the two of them didn't think too much about it. Without saying a word, they followed Zhang Xian and sat down. To be fair, both of them were at the nascent soul realm and it was somewhat rude for them to sit together with a void reversion. The beautiful woman frowned slightly but did not say anything. Naturally, Su Zimo could not be bothered as well. The beautiful woman sized up the four of them. He had long seen through the group as well. Although the three Dharma Daojuan's cultivation realms were the highest, their statuses were lower than the three youths. Among the three young people, the two men were obviously not shrewd. They seemed to be the hedonistic sons of the royal family. The woman in front of him was elegant, dignified, and had an outstanding temperament. "Fellow, how should I address you?" the beautiful woman asked with a smile. Su Zimo replied, "My surname is Su." The beautiful woman was slightly startled, but she immediately felt relieved. In the cultivation world, it was normal for strangers to not tell each other their full or real names. After all, one had to be wary of others. The beautiful woman was tactful and did not continue asking. She merely raised a cup of fragrant tea and said with a smile, "I'm Yulan. It's fate that I'm able to meet you in the North region, Brother Su. Let me toast you with tea in place of wine, Brother Su." Unknowingly, the woman named Yulan changed the way she addressed him from fellow Taoist to Brother Su without any awkwardness. The distance between the two of them seemed to have shortened as well. "You're welcome, fellow Taoist," Su Zimo replied indifferently and raised his cup of fragrant tea, downing it in a single gulp. Yulan asked with a smile, "Brother Su, you have an extraordinary bearing. You must be from a major sect, right?" Although she seemed to be praising him, in reality, she was also trying to find out more about Su Zimo. "I'm just an itinerant cultivator." Su Zimo shook his head and smiled. That was indeed the truth. More than 100 years ago, when he offended Glass Palace and left the Middle Continent, he had already left Misty Peak. Yulan glared at Su Zimo with her beautiful eyes. When she saw that the latter was calm and did not seem to be faking it, she was slightly relieved. When the two men heard that Su Zimo was an itinerant cultivator, the contempt in their hearts deepened and they pouted instinctively. The two men were no longer focused on Su Zimo. Instead, their gazes would drift towards the slender blonde girl behind Su Zimo from time to time. Their eyes shone with a strange glint. Su Zimo glanced at Yulan and suddenly asked, "May I know where you're from, fellow Taoist?" Yulan's expression dimmed as she shook her head and sighed. "My family fell and was destroyed by an enemy. Sigh, it's better not to mention it." Su Zimo revealed a curious expression and asked, "What enemy?" Yulan hesitated for a moment and looked into Su Zimo's clear eyes. After a long time, she made up her mind and said slowly, "To be honest, fellow Taoist, I cough. Right then, a series of violent coughs sounded from the bow of the ship, interrupting Yulan. The old man who was controlling the spirit vessel the entire time stood up shakily and lamented, "I'm old. So, my body can't take it anymore after controlling the spirit vessel for a while." The old man staggered as he walked over unsteadily. Yulan stood up hurriedly with a concerned expression. "I'm sorry." Yulan smiled apologetically at Su Zimo and supported the old man, leaving the banquet and heading towards the cabin inside. Su Zimo smiled faintly. The old man was the Dharma Daojun. Although he was in his twilight years, he was far from being that weak. The reason why that happened was because the old man did not want Yulan to continue speaking. As for Yulan, she instantly understood the old man's intentions. Thus, she helped the old man up and left for the time being. This kind of trick could be fooled in front of people who were not deeply involved in the world. For example, the two brocade-robed men who were chowing down on the table did not notice anything at all. It was useless against Su Zimo. He remained calm and collected, quietly observing the situation. The moment they returned to the cabin and closed the door, Yulan frowned and said softly, "Uncle Zheng, if there's anything, you can just send a voice transmission with your spirit consciousness. Why bother?" The old man straightened his back and his face regained its color. He was hale and hearty and did not look old at all. Uncle Zheng shook his head. "Princess, don't blame me. If I send a voice transmission with my spirit consciousness, there will definitely be spirit consciousness fluctuations. That lad might have sensed it. There's an array formation in this cabin that can isolate spirit consciousness and sound. It's only safe to speak here." Yulan nodded and did not dwell on the matter. She asked, "Uncle Zheng, why did you interrupt me?" "We only met by chance." Are you really going to reveal your background, princess? Uncle Zheng asked in a deep voice with a grim expression. Yulan nodded. Although fellow Taoist Su is at the Void Reversion realm, he has an extraordinary bearing. If we can befriend him and gain his trust, it might be of great help to us in reviving our dynasty. What can an itinerant cultivator at the Void Reversion realm help us with? The old man was disapproving. Princess, don't think that he's amazing just because he has a golden lion as his mount. I noticed that the golden lion is limping and crippled. There's nothing special about it. Uncle Zheng, trust me, Yulan said with a firm expression, my judgment of people is never wrong. This person is not simple. Chapter 1140. On the bow of the ship. Not long after Yulan supported the old man and left, Night Spirit, who was initially silent, lowered his head slightly. His eyes flickered as though he had sensed something. Brother, what princess is that, Yulan? Night Spirit sent a voice transmission to Su Zimo with his spirit consciousness. There was indeed an array formation above the cabin that could isolate spirit consciousness and sound. Even Su Zimo could not hear the conversation between Yulan and Yulan inside. However, Night Spirit could hear it. Yes, Su Zimo replied without the slightest bit of surprise. Brother, you knew about it long ago? Night Spirit asked in surprise. Su Zimo smiled gently and sent a voice transmission, that Yulan is a princess while the two of them are princes. If I'm not wrong, the three of them should be from the Great Yu, Great Xia and Great Shang dynasties. Night Spirit was even more surprised. Su Zimo explained, this spirit vessel is noble and elegant with treasures. If you observe carefully, you can see many characteristics of the royal family. Furthermore, the way the three of them move and sit is different from ordinary cultivators. Only those from the royal family have such characteristics. Night Spirit pondered for a moment and reacted. When he saw the three of them, he also felt that they were familiar. It turned out that the way the three of them moved was similar to Ji Yaoxue. They were all from the royal family. Also, Su Zimo continued, this spirit vessel came from the territory of Great Zhou and there are 3 Dharma Daojun on it. In the territory of Great Zhou, the only factions with 3 Dharma Daojun are the 3 dynasties. Before this, he was already puzzled. Normally speaking, the 3 dynasties should have Dharma Daojun presiding over them. However, after the destruction of the 3 dynasties, the 3 Dharma Daojun disappeared without a trace. Who would have thought that he would hide with the royal bloodline of the 3 dynasties? Now that he was heading to the North Region Dao gathering, it seemed like he was up to something. The 3 great dynasties had been destroyed by the Great Zhou dynasty. From a certain perspective, the bloodline of these 3 great dynasties was a threat to Ji Yaoxue. Big brother, do you want to? Night Spirit's tone suddenly became a little eerie when he learned the identities of these people. Let's wait and see what they plan to do. Su Zimo shook his head slightly. If these people cultivated peacefully from today onwards and didn't interfere in the battles between the dynasties, then he didn't have to annihilate them. Su Zimo and Night Spirit were communicating with each other using their divine senses. On the other side, the 2 princes were also communicating via divine sense. After some time, they exchanged a glance and revealed sinister smiles. Miss, don't just stand there. Come and take a seat. The slightly plump man in the brocade robe squinted his eyes and greeted with a grin. His gaze unscrupulously sized up Nian Qi. Nian Qi merely glanced at him indifferently. She didn't say anything and remained motionless. This person was one of the princes of Great Shang and had seen countless women. But compared to this young girl in front of him, those women were simply rouge and common powder. When he saw Nian Qi's cold and handsome appearance, the Prince of Great Shang was not enraged. Instead, he felt an itch in his heart. Just now, he had already discussed with the Prince of Great Xia beside him on how to take down this girl. If it really didn't work, he would get the 2 imperial advisors to kill this green-robed cultivator. After all, the 2 imperial advisors were the Dharma Daojun and were standing right behind them. When the Prince of Great Xia saw that Nian Qi did not react, he chuckled and stood up. Reaching out, he grabbed Nian Qi's wrist and said, "There's no need to be shy. Come and take a seat." Initially, Su Zimo was communicating with Night Spirit with his spirit consciousness. When he suddenly saw that action, his gaze shifted and landed on the Prince of Great Xia's extended arm. Instantly, his expression turned cold. Instantly, the temperature of the entire bow of the ship plummeted. The atmosphere seemed to have frozen. Initially, the two Dharma Daojun who were standing at the side merely frowned slightly when they saw that. However, all of a sudden, the two of them shuddered and gasped. Pissed. The killing intent exuded by the green-robed cultivator caused both of them to shudder in fear. If that was the case for the Dharma Daojun, it was even worse for the princes of Great Shang and Great Xia who were only at the nascent soul realm. Instantly, their bodies turned incomparably stiff and their expressions froze as well. Their eyes were filled with bewilderment and their hairs stood on end. It was as though a calamity would befall them the next moment. Who was Su Zimo? How many people had he killed? Who had he killed? If he wanted to kill, even ordinary void reversions would not be able to withstand it, let alone Jining Jinjuan. It was even possible for cowardly people to be scared to death on the spot. It's best if you retract your claws. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to the Prince of Great Xia and he said indifferently, unless you don't want them anymore. Su Zimo's tone was extremely calm, but it made people feel a chill coming from the bottom of their hearts. Almost without hesitation, as though it was an instinctive reaction to avoid danger, the Prince of Great Xia retracted his arm with a swoosh and retreated a few steps, hiding behind a Dharma Daojun. Clang. The Prince of Great Shang stood up hurriedly. In his panic, he bumped into a chair and let out a loud sound. His face was frightfully pale and his legs went limp. He nearly fell to the ground and scrambled to hide behind another Dharma Daojun. I Imperial Advisor. He wants to kill me. The Prince of Great Shang's voice trembled slightly with a shocked expression. When they saw how weak their prince was, the two Dharma Daojun could no longer be bothered to embarrass themselves. Both of them glared at Su Zimo with grim expressions. Fellow Taoist, what do you mean by this? One of the Dharma Daojun took a deep breath and composed himself once more as his gaze turned sharp. He was at the Dharma characteristic realm after all. The green-robed cultivator before them was only at the void reversion realm. Just now's palpitations might have been an illusion. What's wrong? Right then, not far away, the door of the cabin opened and Yulan and the old man at the helm of just now walked out and asked loudly. Initially, Yulan was chatting with Uncle Zheng when she realized that something had happened at the bow of the ship and rushed over. Yulan, you came at the right time. The Prince of Great Xia mustered his courage and said, this Su fella has disobeyed his superiors and wants to kill us. Oh. Yulan's expression was unchanged as she asked instead, why does he want to kill you? Because the Prince of Great Xia was speechless. It was way too embarrassing to say that he harbored ill intentions towards someone else's maidservant. The Prince of Great Shang braced himself and said loudly, no matter what, it's a grave crime for him to have the intention to kill us. He deserves to die. Scram. Suddenly, Yulan hollered with a dark expression and said coldly, return to the cabin and stay there obediently. Don't come out and embarrass yourself. The Prince of Great Shang shrunk his neck from the scolding and did not dare to say anything. However, the Prince of Great Xia turned around with an indignant expression. Imperial Advisor, the Dharma Daojun sighed. Go back. You guys should reflect on yourselves. When they heard that, the two princes' hearts turned cold. They could only grit their teeth and swallow their anger before turning to leave. Chapter 1141. The two princes were filled with resentment. However, they did not know that if Yulan had not asked them to leave, they would have been two corpses by now. If the two imperial advisors wanted to protect them, then the two imperial advisors would have to die with them. Brother Su, I'm sorry. Yulan revealed an apologetic expression and bowed to Su Zimo, saying sincerely, no matter how they offended you just now, I'm here to apologize to you. As a princess of a dynasty, Su Zimo did not expect Yulan to make such an action. They were only acquaintances who had met by chance. To think that Yulan would stand on his side and offend the two princes. Initially, he had intended to make use of this matter to go on a killing spree. However, Yulan's actions made it difficult for him to make a move. Su Zimo nodded and did not say anything else. The two imperial advisors of Great Xia and Great Shang exchanged glances and lamented internally. Although they were of the royal bloodline as well, compared to Princess Yulan, the princes of their dynasties were nothing more than a pile of mud. Despite the destruction of their dynasties, the Princess of Great Yu was thinking of ways to befriend the various major sects and factions, befriending paragons and plotting to revive her dynasty. However, their princes were focused on women. If everything went smoothly at the North Region Dao meet and they succeeded in reviving their dynasty, the two imperial advisors had already decided to follow Princess Yulan. In their eyes, even though they were both women, Princess Yulan was not weaker than the current Empress of Great Zhou. The reason why the Empress of Great Zhou was able to achieve her current accomplishments was all because of Dao being Araki Takashi. Uncle Zheng continued to control the spirit vessel and drove forward. Yulan sat back down and pondered for a moment before saying, "To be honest, I'm the princess of the Great Yu dynasty. Those two are the princes of Great Xia and Great Shang respectively." After saying that, Yulan paused for a moment and looked into Su Zimo's eyes. The two imperial advisors standing behind her felt their hearts tighten as well as they glared at Su Zimo, wanting to see how the latter would react. Unfortunately, they were disappointed. Su Zimo's expression was calm, and his eyes were deep, without the slightest ripple. It was as though the titles of princes and princesses were no different from ordinary people in the eyes of this green-robed cultivator. How could this be? Could it be that this green-robed cultivator had not even heard of the four dynasties of the North region? The two imperial advisors muttered in their hearts. Right then, Su Zimo said indifferently, "As far as I know, the Great Shang, Great Xia and Great Yu dynasties have already been destroyed." When Yulan saw that Su Zimo did not reveal any hostility, she was already relieved. Yes. She smiled bitterly and sighed. It's also a coincidence. The decline of the nation's fate is the will of the heavens. Pausing for a moment, Yulan's gaze became determined again as she said, "However, I'm indignant. I'm not willing to lose to the Emperor of Great Zhou. I want to restore my country." Restore the country? Su Zimo raised his brows slightly. Yulan nodded heavily. The reason why the Great Zhou dynasty is in its current state is not because of how strong it is. It's because of many factors that led to a freak combination of factors. This sentence was not wrong. The reason why the Great Zhou dynasty was able to unify so smoothly was mainly because of the calamity of the Witch Gu. This calamity caused the three dynasties to collapse without a fight and fall apart. Yulan continued, "I believe that I'm not inferior to the Emperor of Great Zhou. The Emperor of Great Zhou is merely relying on a single Dao being, Araki Takashi." When he heard that, a strange look flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. Although Araki Takashi was famous in the current cultivation world, not many people had seen his appearance. Yulan did not know that the person sitting in front of her was Dao being Araki Takashi. Yulan did not notice the strange look in Su Zimo's eyes and continued, "To be honest, fellow Daoist, the reason why I'm heading to the North Region Dao meet is to find a paragon who can suppress Araki Takashi." "You want to suppress Araki Takashi?" Su Zimo laughed and shook his head slightly. Thinking that Su Zimo did not believe her, Yulan said hurriedly, "Brother Su, Dao being, Araki Takashi's body was crippled by a half-martial ancestor and he lost the divine phoenix bone, creation Qinglian and other utmost treasures. His combat strength is far inferior to before. Furthermore, there are many paragons and monster incarnates in this generation. It's not as if there aren't people who can fight against Araki Takashi." "Oh? Tell me about it." Su Zimo asked. Yulan said, "I heard that one of the four gentry cultivation clans, the Yuan clan, produced a monster incarnate. His Dao title is Wushuang and he's the #1 Dao being of the North region. The reason why I'm heading to the North region Dao meet is because I hope to get that person's help. If Dao being Wushuang can take action and suppress Araki Takashi with the power of the Yuan clan to fight against Misty Peak, Great Yu will definitely be able to revive our dynasty." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he realized that Dao Bing Wushuang should be Yuan Wushuang. A look of hatred flashed through the golden lion's eyes when it heard Dao Bing Wushuang's name. However, no one noticed that he was sprawled at the side. Su Zimo asked again, "Do you have a deep relationship with Dao Bing Wushuang?" "Not really," Yulan shook her head and sighed softly. "Although we're both at the void reversion realm, how could I have the chance to come into contact with Dao Bing Wushuang given his status? We've just never met before." "Then why would he help you?" Su Zimo asked. When she heard that question, Yulan suddenly fell silent. The atmosphere at the banquet became a little awkward. "Forget it, pretend I didn't ask." Su Zimo waved it off casually. To be fair, Su Zimo was not curious as to what methods Yulan used to get Yuan Wushuang's help. Just now, he was merely asking casually. Yulan took a deep breath of air and suddenly raised her head. "I heard that Dao Bing Wushuang likes beautiful women." Pausing for a moment, Yulan blushed and grit her teeth. "I believe that I'm not bad-looking and I'm also at the void reversion realm. Furthermore, I was once the princess of Great Yu. I believe that he'll definitely be interested." Su Zimo was stunned. He had not expected Yulan to have such plans. "Is it worth it?" Su Zimo asked instead. "As long as Great Yu can be reborn, sacrificing my body is nothing." Yulan's tone was firm. However, right after, her eyes dimmed and she smiled bitterly. "I'm sure you must despise me in your heart, right?" "That's right, I deserve to be looked down upon by others for belittling myself like this." These were the most secretive things, and also the most embarrassing things. For some reason, Yulan had told him about them. "You don't have to say that," Su Zimo shook his head. Yulan sniffed and forced a smile. "I've been keeping these things in my heart for a long time and it feels much better to say them out loud. For some reason, I just feel that you're trustworthy." Pausing for a moment, Yulan winked at Su Zimo. A woman's sixth sense is very accurate. Standing behind Su Zimo, Nianqi could not help but roll his eyes cutely and call her an idiot internally. She wished she could say it out loud. What bullsh** T sixth sense. This handsome person before her was Dao Bing Araki Takashi whom she wanted to suppress. Night Spirit's gaze turned strange. When Su Zimo saw how honest the other party was, he could not continue pretending and sighed. "Actually, my name is Su Zimo." Chapter 1142. "Ah!" Yulan exclaimed softly with a delighted expression. "Brother Su, you finally let down your guard and told me your true name?" Su Zimo was stunned. Yulan's reaction was completely out of his expectations. Instinctively, he looked at the three Dharma Daojun. The three Dharma Daojun did not react when they heard Su Zimo's name. Araki Takashi established the Dao and imparted martial arts to all living beings. Everyone in the world knew of Araki Takashi's name. Apart from some old friends, not many people in the cultivation world knew that Araki Takashi's name was Su Zimo. It was just like how everyone in the world knew of Shura's name but did not know that Shura's name was Yenbeichin. There were many void reversions that died in the hands of Su Zimo, such as some titular disciples, but even Su Zimo did not know their names. For paragons and monster incarnates like them, their Dao names were their symbol. Generally speaking, when they befriended other fellow Taoists, they would only say their Dao names. A name like Su Zimo was more like a mark in the mortal world. Su Zimo was stunned for a moment before he reacted quickly and felt relieved. That was normal. Although he was bent on killing Xuanyu Daoren, he did not know what Xuanyu Doran's name was. It was enough for him to know that his Dao name was Xian Yu and that he was from Glass Palace. Who cared what his name was? Initially, Su Zimo wanted to remind Yulan. He was even prepared for a huge battle. However, he did not expect Yulan to misunderstand him even though she had never heard of his name before. She thought that Su Zimo had finally let down his guard and said his name. "Brother Su, I want to revive my dynasty. Are you willing to help me?" Yulan took a deep breath and looked at Su Zimo without blinking, asking softly with anticipation. Su Zimo shook his head. Yulan's eyes dimmed. "I know that this request is a little abrupt, but..." Before Yulan could finish speaking, she saw Su Zimo wave his hand and interrupt her. Su Zimo's expression was calm as he said bluntly, Don't even think about reviving your country in the future. It's impossible. Yulan frowned slightly, feeling a little angry. Restoring her country was her dream. She didn't want to admit defeat. She did not think that she would lose. As long as she could obtain Taoist Wushuang's help and suppress Taoist Araki Takashi, she would definitely be able to rebuild the Great Yu, fight against the Great Zhou, and divide the northern region. Earlier, she had found this person pleasing to the eye, but now, she suddenly realized that this green-robed cultivator was a little annoying. Even if Brother Su doesn't intend to help, there's no need to attack me like this, right? Yulan tried her best to control her emotions and said in a deep voice, "If I can obtain the support of some aristocratic families during this trip to the North Region Dao Meet, not only can I revive my country, I can even overthrow the rule of the great Zhou dynasty." Impossible. Su Zimo shook his head and smiled, saying word by word, "As long as Araki Takashi is alive, you'll never be able to revive your country or overthrow the great Zhou dynasty. Everything depends on effort." Yulan's tone turned unyielding as well. "This time round, I intend to ask Taoist Wushuang for help. If he's willing to help, Araki Takashi will be nothing." Haha. Su Zimo reared his head in laughter. "What are you laughing at?" Yulan asked coldly. Su Zimo pursed his lips. "Is Taoist Wushuang that powerful? In this generation, there are many paragons and monster incarnates. The entire Tianhuang mainland is welcoming a golden era. Araki Takashi isn't invincible either. Someone will definitely surpass him and trample on him." Yulan was furious and her expression turned cold. In her opinion, she could understand why Su Zimo did not want to help. However, this person was way too detestable and spared no effort to attack her. She could not accept that. At that moment, Yulan had yet to realize that Su Zimo was not attacking her. Instead, he was reminding her or telling her to back off. The two of them did not get along. If they continued, they would only quarrel. Although the two Dharma Daojuns standing behind Yulan did not say anything, they looked at Su Zimo coldly. Just now, they did not say anything when Su Zimo threatened their prince. After all, their prince was the one who was unreasonable first. Now that this green-robed cultivator did not know his place and was arguing with Princess Yulan, the two Dharma Daojun were filled with killing intent. As long as Yulan gave the order or a look, the two of them would attack decisively. Yulan stood up, intending to leave. The two Dharma Daojun even asked with their eyes if they should attack the green-robed cultivator. Yulan shook her head gently. Although she was a little angry, she was not at the point where she wanted to kill for no reason. Furthermore, she and Su Zimo merely had different thoughts and views. Just now, the two of them were still chatting happily. There was no need for them to turn hostile and kill each other. Yulan turned back to look at Su Zimo. The green-robed cultivator was still sipping his tea casually, as though he did not realize that just now, he was nearly killed because of his words. This person has no shrewdness at all. Could I have misjudged him? Yulan sighed internally and turned to leave. Su Zimo, who was seated at the table, was expressionless, but he was sighing internally as well. If Yulan had not stopped the two Dharma Daojun from attacking, the two imperial advisors would have been reduced to corpses by now. Yulan thought that she had saved Su Zimo's life by stopping the two Dharma Daojun from attacking because of her benevolence. However, she did not know that her benevolence had saved herself. For the next few days, Yulan spent most of her time in the cabin. She would only come out occasionally to talk to Su Zimo. However, after the previous argument, there was clearly more animosity between the two of them. Although Yulan did not chase away Su Zimo and the others, she was no longer as enthusiastic as she was when they first met. On the other hand, the two princes were much friendlier towards Su Zimo. Each time, they would accompany him with smiles, as though they had completely forgotten about their previous unhappiness. About 10 days later, the outline of a city gradually appeared on the horizon ahead. As they approached, the city became clearer. The city walls stretched for thousands of kilometers and could not be seen at a glance. The gigantic black bricks were carved with the marks of time. What was the concept of thousands of kilometers? Cultivators who had just entered the void reversion realm could only extend their spirit consciousnesses to a range of 50 kilometers. Only the Dharma Daojuan's spirit consciousnesses could cover a range of 500 kilometers. Just by looking at the outline of the ancient city, one could tell that it was majestic and even more spectacular than the capital of the great Zhou dynasty. It was like an ancient behemoth sprawled on the ground. Qian Heaven City. It had a long history that could be traced back to the ancient era. All these years, the North Region Dao meet would be held in this ancient city every time Su Zimo's group arrived before the city. Although their spirit vessel was huge, it was as tiny as a grain of sand in front of the ancient city. "We're finally here." Yulan stood in front of the spirit vessel and looked at the tall ancient city before her, murmuring softly. Her expression was complicated as a hint of anticipation, struggle, helplessness, and shame flashed through her eyes. "If you regret it, it's not too late to return now." Su Zimo could sense the change in Yulan's emotions and said indifferently. Yulan remained silent. In the end, her gaze gradually turned resolute. As long as she could restore her dynasty, she would not regret any sacrifice. "Since I've come this far, I have no way out." Yulan gripped her fists tightly and said resolutely. Chapter 1143. When Su Zimo and the others arrived at Qian Heaven City, they could see many cultivators descending from outside the city and walking towards the city gates. On both sides of the city gates, there were many armored soldiers guarding. Those soldiers were not to be trifled with either. With a sweep of his spirit consciousness, he could sense that most of them were void reversions. On the city walls, there were 4 gigantic mirrors that shone with 4 beams of light that enveloped the city gates. Demon Revealing Mirror. The North Region Dao meet was a grand event for the cultivators of the North Region, and no accidents were allowed to happen. With the existence of the Demon Revealing Mirror, they could capture fiend demons that had taken human form and were hiding among the cultivators. On the city walls, the cultivator guarding the Demon Revealing Mirror wore Taoist robes and emitted a powerful aura. He swept his sharp gaze across the cultivators entering the city. That cultivator was a commander of Qian Heaven City and was also a Dharma Daojun. The 4 city gates of Qian Heaven City were guarded by Dharma characteristic commanders. The void reversion soldiers were extremely strict in inspecting the cultivators that came and went. "Let's enter the city as well," Yulan said, and dispelled the spirit vessel, landing on the ground and heading towards the city gates. The presence of 3 Dharma Daojun in their group attracted the attention of the Dharma characteristic commander on the city walls. "Who are you?" At the city gates, 2 void reversion soldiers crossed their halberds and collided, causing sparks to fly as they blocked Su Zimo and the others. "I'm Yulan from the Great Yu Dynasty." Yulan had a calm expression as she pointed to the 2 princes beside her. "These 2 are the princes of Great Xia and Great Shang." "Great Yu, Great Xia and Great Shang?" The soldier guarding the city sneered. "The 3 dynasties are already destroyed. What T princes are they?" When they heard that, the faces of the 2 princes flushed red. However, the 2 of them had timid expressions and did not dare to make a sound. Although they were just 2 guards, they were from a major cultivation aristocratic family. Even before their country was destroyed, they might not have dared to offend these people, let alone the fact that their country was already destroyed. The other guard sized up Yulan without any restraint and said with a burning gaze, "Fellow Taoist Yulan, I believe you have nowhere to go now that your dynasty has been destroyed. Why don't you come to my place? We can become Tao companions and study the Tao of dual cultivation." As the princess of the Great Yu Dynasty, Yulan was extremely beautiful to begin with. She even had the noble aura of royalty and was extremely attractive to most cultivators. Yulan's expression did not change as she said indifferently, "If you want to dual cultivate with me, you'll have to ask if Dao Being Wushuang agrees to it." Hearing the name of Taoist Wushuang, the guard's expression changed and his eyes were filled with deep fear. In fact, Yulan had never seen Yuan Wushuang at all, nor did she have any friendship with him. Her words were also ambiguous. However, when others heard it, they would subconsciously think that she was close to Dao Being Wushuang. "Fellow Taoist Yulan, I'm sorry. I was rude." The guard lowered his head slightly and bowed hurriedly in apology. Yu Lan nodded and headed into the city with the 2 princes and the 3 Dharma Daojun. Su Zimo's group of 4 followed behind them. Su Zimo's gaze swept past the demon-revealing mirror on the city wall casually as he sent a voice transmission to Night Spirit. "Can you hide it?" "Don't worry," Night Spirit's expression was indifferent. The fact that the golden lion was in its true form meant that it was the mount or spirit pet of a cultivator and could enter the city. However, Su Zimo's Qinglian true body did not have any demon bloodline. Nianqi was a Protoss and not a demon. The only thing that could be exposed was Night Spirit. The 4 of them walked to the area covered by the demon-revealing mirror and headed into the city without stopping. When the power of the demon-revealing mirror landed on Night Spirit, it was as though it had entered a black hole and could not detect any aura at all. There was no reaction from the demon-revealing mirror. Right then, the commander guarding the city wall frowned and looked at Su Zimo's group. Earlier on, he suddenly felt his heart skip a beat. However, on second thought, he did not notice anything amiss. The commander shook his head and continued to check on the others. Compared to the stifling atmosphere at the city gate, Qian Heaven City was extremely lively. Cultivators could be seen flying in midair. There were also cultivators riding on spirit beasts that flew over everyone's heads. There were many ancient buildings in the ancient city. There were many cultivators gathered on both sides of the long streets. Some cultivators sat on the ground with items that shone with spirit light in front of them. The North Region Dao meet would only begin in a few days. Qian Heaven City was a rare trading market. Some cultivators remained silent and waited for others to come forward so that they could discuss the price with their spirit consciousnesses in a secretive manner. As for some cultivators, they were hawking loudly, wanting to attract more cultivators so that their treasures could be sold for a higher price. The 2 princes walked side by side. There were spirit consciousnesses between the 2 of them, and it was unknown what they were secretly chatting about. Yu Lan frowned slightly and pondered for a moment before stopping in her tracks. "I'm sure everyone is tired from the journey. Let's find a place to rest first." Pausing for a moment, Yu Lan turned to look at Su Zimo. "Since we've already arrived at Qian Heaven City, let's part ways here. Take care, Brother Su." Yu Lan's tone was slightly heavier when she said, "Take care." She looked at Su Zimo with a hint of reminder. However, Su Zimo was distracted and did not seem to notice. "Don't." The 2 princes hurried over enthusiastically and said with a smile, "We hit it off with Brother Su. Since we've already arrived at Qian Heaven City, why are we in a hurry to part? Let's rest for the night and explore the trading market tomorrow." "Sure." Perhaps moved by the enthusiasm of the 2 princes, Su Zimo agreed with a smile. Yu Lan frowned and sighed internally. This Su Zimo was truly simple-minded. Up until now, he had not realized that he was in extreme danger. Over the past few days, the 2 princes had been fawning over Su Zimo and were very enthusiastic on the surface. However, Yu Lan knew very well that the 2 princes were born in the royal family and were pampered. They were vengeful people. There was no way they would let Su Zimo off after being threatened. It was abnormal for the 2 of them to have such a drastic change in attitude towards Su Zimo. Any cultivator with some intelligence would be able to tell that something was amiss. However, Su Zimo's group was not the only one who did not notice it. The other 3 were like idiots as well. The black-robed man had a cold expression and was indifferent to everything. The lame golden lion could not understand the schemes of the human race. Although the maidservant was extremely beautiful, she was only a vase. As the princess of the Great Yu dynasty, there were some things that she could not say too clearly. However, she could not bear it and wanted to remind Su Zimo. "Princess, forget it." Right then, Uncle Zheng's voice sounded in her mind. "You've already done your best. If that lad follows us tonight, this is his fate." Looking at Su Zimo, who was traveling with the 2 princes and was oblivious to the danger, Yu Lan had a helpless expression and could only sigh softly. Chapter 1144. Yu Lan, Su Zimo and the others found an inn nearby as a temporary place to stay. In this Qiantian city, inns like this could be found everywhere. Their group asked for a total of 3 rooms. Yu Lan and Uncle Zheng were alone. The two princes of Great Shang and Great Xia, as well as their imperial advisors. Su Zimo and the other three were alone. Rest early, Brother Su. Let's tour Qian Heaven City together tomorrow and see if we can find any treasures. The Prince of Great Shang was very enthusiastic as he greeted Su Zimo and bade farewell. Sure, Su Zimo replied casually. The two princes turned to leave and exchanged glances with a smug look in their eyes. Upon returning to their rooms, the two imperial advisors set up a dermic power barrier that isolated the sound of spirit consciousness right away. Princes, are you sure you want to do that? One of the imperial advisors asked in a deep voice. Of course. The Prince of Great Xia said coldly with a dark expression, you were present when that person wanted to kill me previously. As the saying goes, those who strike first gain the advantage and those who strike later suffer. That's right, the Prince of Great Shang nodded as well. Since that person is an itinerant cultivator without any shrewdness or background, so be it if he's killed. Pausing for a moment, he seemed to have thought of something and licked his lips. Right, don't hurt that yellow-haired girl. The two imperial advisors exchanged glances without saying anything. There were some things that both of them were well aware of. The true reason why the two princes wanted to kill was because they wanted to monopolize the golden-haired girl. After all, the two princes had done too many such things when the Great Shang and Great Xia dynasties were still around. The two imperial advisors were disdainful towards such matters. However, they did not refuse. After all, they did not like Su Zimo either. With their cultivation base and combat strength, it would be a piece of cake for them to kill 2 or 3 void reversions in this inn. On the other side, Yu Lan looked at Su Zimo's departing back view and could not bear it. No matter what, she was the one who invited that person over. If not for this person might not have had a grudge with the two princes. If this person were to die here, she would feel somewhat apologetic. At that thought, Yu Lan slowed down. After seeing the two princes leave, she whispered to Uncle Zheng, Uncle Zheng, head back first. I'll be right back. With that said, Yu Lan followed behind Su Zimo and entered his room. What's up? Su Zimo raised his eyebrows and asked. Yu Lan closed the door hurriedly and waved her sleeves, setting up a dermic power barrier. She whispered, Brother Su, if I were you, I would leave this inn immediately. Su Zimo asked curiously, why is that? Yu Lan frowned slightly and asked with a grim tone, Brother Su, do you really think that you'll have a chance to see the sun tomorrow after resting here for a night? Su Zimo's expression changed, and his voice became low. He asked mysteriously, why? Will it rain tomorrow? Nianqi couldn't help but burst out laughing. Yu Lan's face darkened and her lungs were about to explode. Rain? Rain my ass. Yu Lan almost couldn't help but curse. That person was truly stupid to the extreme. She had already warned him to this extent, but that person did not notice at all. Yu Lan was infuriated. She had truly misjudged this time round to think that this person was not simple. The golden lion sprawled at the side and could not help but grin as well. It had been a long time since that smile appeared on his face. Suddenly, he felt as though he had returned to the days when the 7 of them were invincible in the ancient battlefield and bickered and laughed. How delightful! At that moment, the depression in the golden lion's heart lessened significantly. Yu Lan took a few deep breaths in succession and her towering chest heaved up and down. She tried her best to compose herself and grit her teeth. Brother Su, you're about to face a calamity. After pausing for a moment, Yu Lan no longer concealed and said directly, someone wants to kill you. Hurry and run. Initially, she thought that Su Zimo would be shocked. Unexpectedly, Su Zimo shrugged and waved it off with a calm expression, saying casually, it's fine, my life is tough. Generally speaking, those who want to kill me will die tragically. He wasn't just making things up. For more than 100 years, there were countless experts who wanted to kill him, but most of them had already perished. Except, his words were simply laughable to the extreme in Yu Lan's ears. Just how arrogant and conceited was this person? How could he be so confident and say such words when he didn't even know who his opponent was? If he knew that the people who wanted to kill him were two Dharma Dao Jun, he would probably be scared out of his wits, right? You're on your own now. Disappointed, Yulan no longer tried to persuade him and merely said coldly before turning to leave. See you tomorrow, Su Zimo said with a grin. Yulan paused in her tracks and shuddered in anger. Gritting her teeth, she said, I hope so. After Yulan left and Su Zimo closed the door, he retracted his smile and murmured softly. Seems like I'm going to be restless tonight. When Yulan returned to her room, she was still angry. Forget it, Uncle Zheng smiled indifferently. Princess, there's no need to be angry over someone who's about to die. You're benevolent and have already reminded him. You can't be blamed for this. Yulan could not explain why, but she felt indignant. Her first impression of Su Zimo when she saw him was that he was not simple. That was the reason why she invited him warmly and even revealed her background and plans to befriend him. She believed in her first instinct. However, after interacting with him for the past few days, she realized that there was something mysterious about this person. He was hazy and could not be seen clearly or guessed. At times, he was silent and his deep eyes seemed to contain a sea of stars. Occasionally, he would exude an aura. It was domineering and dignified, looking down on everything. That ethereal aura seemed to be able to devour mountains and rivers and accommodate the vast firmaments. However, at times, this person seemed unsophisticated and did not know when to advance or retreat. In fact, he did not even notice the scheming of cultivators. Let's not think about him anymore. Yulan shook her head. After a long time, she had no idea and her head was dizzy from thinking about it. She tried her best to calm her mind and lay on the bed, keeping her mind clear so that she could calm down and recuperate. As time passed by, the night deepened. The entire Qian Heaven City was much quieter than it was during the day. In this dark night, in an inconspicuous inn, there was a trace of ghastly and bone-piercing killing intent pervading the air. Two figures floated out of a room silently. They were the imperial advisors of the Great Xia and Great Shang dynasties. The two of them exchanged glances and nodded. In a flash, they floated toward Su Zimo's room not far away like two ghosts. Chapter 1145. Standing at the door, the two Dharma Daojun listened attentively. At this distance, the two of them could clearly hear the breathing in the room. There were a total of 4 of them. Every single breath was even and calm. It was clear that the 4 void reversions in the room did not notice their movements at all. The two of them smirked smugly. Given their cultivation, it was way too easy for them to hide from the senses of void reversions. Their spirit consciousnesses moved and enveloped the room slowly, forming a gigantic spirit consciousness barrier that could isolate sound. Even though it was easy for them to kill a void reversion with their methods, it was still extremely easy. However, this was Qian Heaven City after all, and it was best if they did not alarm anyone. That way, they could do it cleanly and not attract any unforeseen events. After the spirit consciousness barrier was formed, the two of them no longer concealed their tracks. They pushed open the door and entered, closing it behind them. The room was not big and could be seen with a single glance. There was a bed in the innermost area and the green-robed cultivator was lying inside. His back was facing the two imperial advisors and he was still asleep. Beside the bed, the golden-haired girl sat on the ground with her eyes closed, as though she was cultivating. In another corner, a golden lion was crouching there. It seemed to have heard the commotion, but it only twitched its ears and did not turn its head to look over. The two imperial advisors were stunned for a moment before sneering. They did not conceal the sound of their doors opening and closing. Under such circumstances, the people in the room were not vigilant at all. These people deserved to die. They truly did not know how the 4 of them managed to cultivate to the void reversion realm and survive until now given their vigilance. However, the two imperial advisors frowned before long. There seemed to be something wrong with the room. It was as though the two of them had overlooked something extremely important. All of a sudden, almost at the same time, a light flashed through their minds. There was 1 less person in the room. Just before they entered the room, there were 4 more breathing sounds. However, after they entered the room, there was 1 less breathing sound. That was because their gazes were attracted by Su Zimo, Nian Qi, and the Golden Lion immediately. That was the reason why they did not notice it immediately. The person who disappeared might still be in this room. So much so that they were unable to sense it. Although the two imperial advisors were in the transcendence realm, at this moment, they felt their scalps tingle and their hair stand on end. It was as if they had been targeted by an extremely terrifying existence. A blurry figure was hidden in the darkness above their heads. This figure was extremely close to the two of them, almost within reach. However, the two imperial advisors did not notice it at all. Not good. The two imperial advisors felt like their hearts were about to explode. They immediately wanted to unleash their magic power and leave this place. Unfortunately, it was all too late. The moment they stepped into this room, they were already two dead men. In the darkness, the night spirit was like a hunting god of death. His eyes were cold and emotionless. Suddenly, a purple gold tail appeared behind him. On the tailbone, a cold light was flashing, like a sharp spike, piercing into the back of the head of an imperial preceptor in an instant and coming out from between his eyebrows. The night spirit's tail pierced through the head of an imperial advisor. Before that person could say anything, his essence spirit was destroyed on the spot. Just as the night spirit extended his tail, he extended his palm and stabbed down at the head of the other imperial advisor. Exclamation point. There was almost no obstruction. The Dharma Daojuan's tough skull was like tofu against the night spirit's claws. 5 bloody holes appeared on the head of the imperial advisor. Before he could even react, his soul core had already been crushed into pieces, and he perished. If it was a head-on fight, the two Dharma Daojun might not be so useless. However, Night Spirit hid in the dark and struck first. Before the two imperial advisors could see how the Night Spirit attacked, they died tragically on the spot. Night Spirit's expression was calm, as though he had done something insignificant. He stood at the door and listened for a while. After sensing for a while, he hugged the two corpses and left the room in a flash. In the darkness of the night, his figure was almost indiscernible, like a ghost. In the blink of an eye, he had already snuck into the room of the two princes. The room was slightly bigger and there were 2 huge beds. The 2 princes were sleeping soundly on the bed. Even in their dreams, there was a hint of lust on their faces and saliva dripped from the corners of their mouths. They had a plan long ago. If nothing went wrong, the annoying green-robed cultivator, the cold black-robed man and the lame golden lion would be killed by the 2 imperial advisors. The golden-haired girl was the only one left. The next morning, when the golden-haired girl saw that everyone around her had died tragically, she would suffer a huge blow and might break down mentally. At that moment, 2 people would appear in time to comfort the golden-haired girl and make love to her. With that fantasy in mind, the 2 of them were already having beautiful dreams. They did not know that a black-robed man was hugging 2 corpses beside their bed and looking at them coldly. Night Spirit flicked 2 dermic arts from his fingertips and landed on the 2 princes, causing them to sleep even more soundly. Thereafter, Night Spirit placed the corpse of the imperial advisor of Great Xia gently on the bed of the Prince of Great Xia. The corpse lay beside the Prince of Great Xia with its body turned sideways and a pair of protruding eyes met the lewd face of the Prince of Great Xia. It was an extremely strange scene. In his deep sleep, the Prince of Great Xia was having a beautiful dream and would even smack his lips from time to time. However, in front of him, there was a corpse that was still warm. Blood was still flowing from its head, dyeing the bed red. It was hard to imagine what it would be like when the Prince of Great Xia woke up and saw this. Night Spirit turned around and came to the other bed. He placed the body of the imperial advisor of Great Shang on it and did the same. The imperial advisor glared at the Prince of Great Shang with his dead fish eyes. The 2 princes did not realize that their nightmare had just begun. After doing that, Night Spirit smirked and left the room in a flash. The entire process was silent and did not attract anyone's attention. On the other side, in Yu Lan's room, Yu Lan tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. A moment later, Uncle Zheng's voice sounded. "Princess, sleep. That person should be dead." When she heard that, Yu Lan's body shuddered and she sighed helplessly. Actually, Uncle Zheng was also paying attention to the commotion outside. The two imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia moved and left the room. They arrived outside Su Zimo's room and set up a spirit consciousness barrier. None of those actions could escape Uncle Zheng's senses. Not long after the two imperial advisors entered the room, the spirit consciousness barrier disappeared. Furthermore, the two of them did not come out again. This meant that the two of them had already killed everyone in the room cleanly before dispersing the spirit consciousness barrier. Uncle Zheng no longer paid attention to the room. At that moment, he did not realize that right under his nose, Night Spirit had left the room silently and moved the two corpses back. Chapter 1146. The next day, Yulan sat up at the first glimmer of dawn. Her eyes were slightly red and bloodshot. Last night, when she heard the news of Su Zimo and the others dying, not only was she unable to fall asleep, her heart was even more chaotic and she was no longer sleepy. Yulan sat by the bed and stared at a corner in deep thought. Uncle Zheng, who was sitting quietly at the side, opened his eyes slowly and consoled softly, "Princess, you're not to be blamed for this. You don't have to feel guilty at all. There are some things that you'll be able to accept once you're older." "Yes." Yulan took a deep breath and nodded. "Uncle Zheng, right now, the most important thing for me is to revive my dynasty." Her gaze turned resolute once more. "Nothing and no one can stop me from rebuilding Great Yu. I'm relieved that you have that belief." Uncle Zheng nodded with a smile. "Princess, I have good news for you. If nothing goes wrong, the two imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia will assist you as well." "Really?" Yulan's eyes lit up. If she could obtain the help of the two Dharma Daojun, her hopes of rebuilding Great Yu would increase. Uncle Zheng nodded. "Those two princes have no ambitions and are useless. The two of them unintentionally revealed their intentions to follow you, Princess. As long as you nod your head, I'll lobby for you today and win the two of them over completely." "All right." Yulan bowed deeply to Uncle Zheng and said sincerely, "I'll have to trouble you then, Uncle Zheng. You'll forever be the imperial advisor of Great Yu and my teacher. Let's go. You haven't slept the entire night. Let's go out for a breather." Uncle Zheng stood up and said. Yulan nodded and pushed open the door. A fresh wave of spirit qi surged over and she was invigorated. Instinctively, Yulan's gaze shifted to a room not far away. That room should have been occupied by a cultivator with delicate features. But now, he was probably a cold corpse. Right then, the door was pushed open with a creak. A familiar figure walked out from inside. He was dressed in a green robe and had sleepy eyes. He stood at the door with his hands raised high and stretched lazily. Yulan's petite mouth gradually widened in shock as she stared at the figure without blinking, rooted to the spot. As if sensing Yulan's gaze, Su Zimo turned his head and looked at her. He greeted her with a smile, "Good morning." Yulan exclaimed softly with a flustered expression. Instinctively, she replied, "Morning." How did you?" Yulan blinked but did not know how to ask. Although she had countless questions when she saw that Su Zimo was still alive, in the depths of her heart, she let out a long sigh of relief and even felt an indescribable joy. Uncle Zheng was originally in the house. When he heard the commotion outside, he frowned and walked out to take a look. He was also stunned on the spot. "You're still alive?" Uncle Zheng did not hide his surprise and asked directly. Su Zimo had a calm expression. "I'm indeed tired from the journey. I slept soundly. How could I have died?" When he saw that Su Zimo did not seem to be faking it, Uncle Zheng was stunned instead. Right then, Night Spirit walked out from behind Su Zimo. Thereafter, Nian Qi appeared. Finally, the Golden Lion walked out as well. The group of four was safe and sound. There was no sign of injury at all. How was that possible? Uncle Zheng was confused. Late last night, he clearly sensed that the two imperial advisors of Great Xia and Great Shang had entered Su Zimo's room. Furthermore, the two of them had specially set up a spirit consciousness barrier. Could it be that something had happened that caused the two imperial advisors to not make a move? Uncle Zheng was prepared to make a move and ask the two imperial advisors what happened in that room last night. Right then, a tragic cry sounded from the rooms of the princes of Great Shang and Great Xia. Immediately after, an even more shrill cry rang out. It was as if the owner of the voice had received a great shock, and the voice was filled with endless fear. Uncle Zheng's expression changed. He did not have time to think about why Su Zimo was still alive. In a flash, he rushed towards the rooms of the two princes. The old man's movement technique was extremely fast and did not look like he was in his twilight years. Yulan followed hurriedly as well. Smiling faintly, Su Zimo strolled towards the room in a leisurely manner. Bang! Uncle Zheng knocked open the door and rushed in. When he focused his gaze, he could not help but gasp and take half a step back instinctively. Uncle Zheng, what's wrong? Yulan welcomed him and asked hurriedly when she saw that something was amiss with Uncle Zheng's expression. She then glanced into the room. This glance also gave her a fright, and the blood drained from her face. The room was filled with an extremely strong stench of blood and a thick aura of death that was nauseating. There were two corpses lying on the two beds facing the door. There was a pool of blood beneath them that had already dyed the bed red and was almost dry. It was clear that they had been dead for a long time. Although the two corpses had their backs facing the door, Uncle Zheng and Yulan could recognize them from their backs. The two corpses were the imperial advisors of Great Shang and Great Xia. The two Dharma Daojun were dead. Who did it? Why was it so quiet? Why was there no sound at all? The two of them had snuck into Su Zimo's room last night. How did they die here? Countless questions surged in their minds. Uncle Zheng and Yulan's minds were in a mess. The death of the two imperial advisors sent chills down Uncle Zheng's spine as well. This meant that he was also in immense danger and could die at any moment. Uncle Zheng was an imperial advisor of a dynasty and a Dharma characteristic expert after all. He merely took a few deep breaths and calmed down before entering the room. Yulan suppressed her disgust and followed him in. Uncle Zheng looked around and did not find any clues. There were no signs of a fight either. "Mom, come over." Inside the huge bed, the Prince of Great Xia curled up in a corner with a terrified expression. His body trembled as he looked at Uncle Zheng and the others with a trembling voice. On the other bed, the Prince of Great Shang was not in a much better state. Just now, the two tragic cries were unsurprisingly from the two princes. When the two of them woke up, they saw the two imperial advisors that they relied on as corpses lying beside them, staring at them with a pair of dead fish eyes. Who could bear it? Although the two of them were Jining Jinjuan, they were mentally deranged from the sudden shock. Uncle Zheng came to the bed and could not help but frown when he smelled the stench of feces and urine. The two princes were so scared that they peed their pants. They no longer had their former glory as they huddled in a corner, trembling like rats with nowhere to run. Uncle Zheng clenched his fists slightly and flipped the corpses of the two imperial advisors over. Both of them had terrified expressions and their protruding eyes were filled with immense fear. Even though he was prepared, his heart skipped a beat. It was truly hard to imagine how frightened the two Dharma Daojun were before they died for them to reveal such expressions. Chapter 1147. How could this be? Yulan frowned and could not help but ask. I don't know either. Uncle Zheng shook his head and looked at the two princes who were still in shock in the corner. Perhaps they're the only ones who know the answer. I don't know anything. The Prince of Great Xia's voice was still trembling. Uncle Zheng's gaze was sharp as he hollered, Your Highness, calm down. If you don't say anything and the two imperial advisors die for no reason, we might be the ones to die tomorrow. Leave this place. The Prince of Great Shang seemed to have grasped onto a life-saving straw as he said hurriedly, That's right, leave Qin Heaven City and you guys. I don't want to revive my dynasty anymore. With that said, the Prince of Great Shang scrambled towards the door. The Prince of Great Xia reacted as well and followed closely behind. Just as the two princes reached the door, Su Zimo walked in with a gentle expression and asked with a smile, Your Highnesses, where do you want to go? The expressions of the two princes changed and their bodies trembled instinctively. In their eyes, the green-robed cultivator's smile was like that of a fiend celestial from hell. We want to go back. The Prince of Great Xia had a fearful expression and pleaded with a hint of pleading in his voice. Su Zimo said, Don't. Didn't we agree yesterday that we're going to tour Qian Heaven City together today? The two princes were so scared that they were about to cry. How could they be in the mood to tour Qian Heaven City? Both of them knew that they were the ones who asked the two imperial advisors to assassinate Su Zimo. But now, the two imperial advisors were dead, but Su Zimo was safe and sound. This matter could not be clearer. The smiling, cultured and scholarly cultivator before them was a fiend celestial. Now that the fiend celestial was standing at the door and inviting the two of them to travel together, the two of them wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Su Zimo's gaze shifted to the two corpses in the room, and he sighed gently. What a pity that the two imperial advisors died just like that. Uncle Zheng and Yulan's gazes were fixed on Su Zimo. However, the two of them could not read any information from Su Zimo's face. The only thing that was suspicious was that this person appeared too calm. However, it was too arbitrary and illogical to conclude that the death of the two imperial advisors was related to this person based on his calm expression. One had to know that the two imperial advisors were in the Dharma characteristic realm. As for Su Zimo and the others, they were all at the void reversion realm. There was a difference of a major cultivation realm between them. How was it possible to kill two Dharma characteristic Tao lords silently? Your Highness. Uncle Zheng's attention fell on the two princes again. He asked in a deep voice, "Did the two state preceptors go out last night?" The two nodded obediently. "Where did he go?" Uncle Zheng asked. The two princes looked hesitant. They stole a glance at Su Zimo, not daring to say anything. Uncle Zheng narrowed his eyes and asked in a low voice, "Did she go to Su Zimo's room?" "I don't know." The Prince of Great Xia shook his head hurriedly. "I fell asleep last night and didn't know anything. The moment I woke up, I saw that the state preceptors were dead." "Me too," the Prince of Great Shang added hurriedly as well. "Why did they go to my room?" Su Zimo looked at the two princes and asked with a fake smile, "The two state preceptors can't be thinking of killing me, right?" "No." The two princes denied hurriedly. Su Zimo nodded and said casually, "That's good. Most people who want to kill me will die tragically." The speaker did not mean it, but the listener took it seriously. Although Su Zimo said it casually, the two princes were scared out of their wits. Their faces were pale and they felt their legs go limp, almost kneeling on the ground. Yulan's heart skipped a beat as well. That was what Su Zimo said to her when she reminded him of the impending calamity last night. It was almost the exact same thing. To think that the two state preceptors would die here in the wee hours of the morning. Could this matter truly have nothing to do with him? "I'll head out first. You guys deal with it. I still have to walk around the city later." Su Zimo had just turned around when he paused in his tracks and glanced sideways. "Your Highnesses, you won't sneak away if you want to travel with me, right?" "Definitely not." The two princes replied hurriedly. "That's good." Su Zimo smiled in satisfaction and turned to leave. By the time Su Zimo's figure disappeared completely, the two princes could no longer hold on and fell to the ground limply. Unknowingly, they were already drenched in sweat. "It's him. It must be him." The prince of the Great Xia dynasty trembled slightly as he mumbled repeatedly, "Who is it?" Yulan could not help but ask, "You mean to say that Brother Su was the one who killed the two state preceptors?" The Prince of Great Shang nodded repeatedly as well. "That's right, it's that demon." Instinctively, Yulan looked at Uncle Zheng. The words of the two princes were truly ridiculous. However, she still wanted to hear Uncle Zheng's speculation. "My first thought was Su Zimo as well," Uncle Zheng said in a deep voice. "However, there's no way they were the ones who did this." "What do you mean?" Yulan asked. Uncle Zheng pointed to the fatal wounds on the heads of the two state preceptors. 2 wounds that killed them in a single strike. This means that the two of them did not resist at all. In other words, the combat strength of this murderer is superior to the two state preceptors. Yulan nodded. "That's right. Even if Su Zimo and the others have the strength to kill the Dharma Daojun across major cultivation realms, it's impossible for them to kill the Dharma Daojun in a single strike. That's only one of the reasons," Uncle Zheng said. "Looking at the 2 wounds, it's clear that they weren't man-made or left behind by any weapon." As he said that, Uncle Zheng placed his palm on the head of one of the state preceptors and said in a deep voice, "This should be the claw of some fiend demon. There's still a wisp of demonic chi on it." As for Su Zimo's group of 4, only the lion is a demon. However, his strength is not at that realm. Furthermore, the lion's claw is completely different from this wound. Yulan nodded. This was almost ironclad evidence. However, she did not expect that there was a terrifying existence among Su Zimo's group of 4 that could even hide from the demon-revealing mirror. It was impossible for Uncle Zheng to see through Night Spirit's facade. Yulan looked at the 2 princes and said, "Did you guys hear that? This can't be done by Brother Su. It's him." The Prince of Great Xia seemed to be possessed, and the fear in his eyes had yet to dissipate as he said repeatedly, "It must be him. His smile and gaze are telling me that he was the one who killed the state preceptor." Ice. Yulan sighed. After this shock, the 2 of them were no longer in their right minds. Now that the 2 princes were reduced to such a state, they might have to live in fear every day. It was even more painful than killing them. The 2 princes were indeed scared out of their wits. However, their guesses were very close to the truth. They were not as calm and rational as Uncle Zheng and Yulan, who could deduce many conclusions based on some clues. They only had one-track minds. 2 state preceptors went to kill Su Zimo. The state preceptors were dead, but Su Zimo was still alive. This was done by Su Zimo. Chapter 1148. No matter who the true culprit was, Uncle Zheng and Yulan felt a sense of oppression when the 2 Dharma Dao Jun died beside them. The North Region Dao meet had yet to begin. For the next few days, Uncle Zheng and Yulan did not dare to rest or relax, afraid that they would be assassinated silently by the fiend demon hidden in the dark. If the 2 of them were already in such a state, it was even worse for the 2 princes. After a few days, the 2 princes were tormented by the fear in their hearts and were on the verge of breaking down. They thinned rapidly and looked dispirited. Sometimes, the 2 princes would even be delirious and mutter things like, "It must be him," repeatedly. The only one who was no different from usual was Su Zimo's group of 4. Sometimes, even Yulan admired the 4 of them. On the day the 2 imperial advisors died, she told Su Zimo about Uncle Zheng's speculation. Furthermore, she told Su Zimo and the others that there was a powerful fiend demon hidden in Qian Heaven City and told them to be careful. In the end, Su Zimo and the others did not care at all, as though they did not know what fear was. It was unknown if this person was truly fearless or if he was a newborn calf that had never experienced life and death. Yulan had not been idle for the past few days either. In Qian Heaven City, she had heard a lot about the North Region Dao meet. In this generation, the cultivation civilization was at its peak and could almost compare to the ancient era. There were many paragons and monster incarnates. Many paragons were gathered at the North Region Dao meet this time round. Many paragons were even as famous as Dao being Wushuang. One of the upper sects, Dao being 100 Ghost of Dark Ghost sect, had cultivated a secret skill that no one in Dark Ghost sect had managed to cultivate for 1,000 years. His combat strength was heaven-defying, and he had suppressed countless people of the same cultivation realm. Up till this point of his cultivation, he had fought countless battles and was defeated less than 10 times. Dao being Blazing Son of Blaze Columbus Valley was also infamous for his ferocity and was known as the #1 fire controller of the North Region. In terms of comprehension of the Dao of Fire, he was unprecedented and was comparable to the ancient sages. Dao being Zimu of Heavenly Piercing Sword sect was a genius of the Dao of the Sword. He was extremely famous in the North Region. It was said that a mighty figure of the Middle Continent's sword sect fancied his potential and wanted to take him in as a disciple, but he rejected him. Daoist Zimu was known as one of the twin swords of the Northern Region. The Seven Kills sect and the Mystic Firmament Divine cult of the upper sects both had outstanding geniuses. Of course, there were also some sects that were weaker among the 10 upper sects of the North Region. For example, the Dragon Tiger sect had previously participated in the battle of the 4 great dynasties, causing the sect's vitality to be greatly damaged. Apart from the 10 upper sects, the 4 major cultivation clans were not to be underestimated either. For example, Taoist Huan Guang of the Dugu clan was a genius of the sword Dao. His illusory sword Dao was both real and illusory. In the same rank, no one could see through his sword Dao. Taoist illusory light was the other of the northern region's twin swords. Dao being Zimu and Dao being Huan Guang. These two sword Dao geniuses were extremely infamous in the North region and were almost invincible. In this North region Dao meet, the two 3-foot-long blades would probably have to fight it out. Of course, among these geniuses, the most famous was Taoist Wushuang of the Yuan clan. There were also some geniuses who wanted to challenge Taoist Wushuang's position. Apart from the sparring between void reversions, there were also many clashes between Dharma Daojun. There would definitely be a fierce battle at the North region Dao meet. However, no one realized that there were 4 inconspicuous people in Qian Heaven City who were prepared to stir up a torrential wave at the North region Dao meet. For the past few days, apart from the first day when Su Zimo went out for a spin, he had been staying in the inn to recuperate. Yulan wanted to make use of this opportunity to befriend as many paragons as possible and establish connections with some sects and factions to prepare for her revival of her dynasty. However, Su Zimo did not have that many plans. He only needed to confirm 2 things before coming to Qian Tian City. Firstly, where was Yuan Wushuang? Secondly, would Xuanyu Daoren come? These 2 pieces of information could be obtained within a day. For the past few days, Yuan Wushuang had yet to appear and Su Zimo and the others did not make any moves either. However, they had already received definite news that Yuan Wushuang would definitely appear at the North region Dao meet. As for Xuanyu Daoren, he should not be coming this time round. It was said that Glass Palace only sent a void reversion this time round to compete with Yuan Wushuang for the position of the number 1 Dao being of the North region. As the time approached, the Golden Lion became increasingly nervous. He had been separated from Cacao for 9 years. In fact, he did not even know if Cacao was still alive. He looked forward to their reunion. However, he was worried that something would happen in between. He was worried that Su Zimo, Night Spirit and Nian Qi would be in danger because they stood up for him. This was the North region Dao meet. It was one of the largest events in the cultivation world of the North region. Even the overlord of Wild Lion Ridge would not dare to lead 10 million fiend demons here, let alone the 4 of them. Void reversions were not the only ones at this Dao meet, there were also many Dharma Daojun. How could they handle it? The Golden Lion had no doubts about Night Spirit's combat strength. However, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. If they were surrounded, they would most likely be doomed. More and more cultivators gathered in Qian Heaven City and it was getting livelier. Over the past few days, news spread from time to time. The appearance of any paragon would cause quite a stir. This day, the North region Dao meet officially began. Su Zimo tidied his green robes and walked out of the room with Night Spirit, Nian Qi and the Golden Lion. They bumped into Yulan and the others who were approaching. "Brother Su, you're finally willing to come out." Yulan smiled. Uncle Zheng nodded at Su Zimo as a form of greeting. The 2 princes hid behind Yulan and Uncle Zheng, not daring to look up at Su Zimo. Su Zimo could no longer be bothered with the 2 of them. The North region Dao meet was held in the center of the city. In the middle of Qian Heaven City, there was a gigantic protruding stone platform. At the North region Dao meet, the fights between cultivators were carried out on this stone platform. Around the stone platform, there were nearly 20 stone pillars standing tall. The stone pillars were extremely spacious and could accommodate at least a few hundred people. There were some chairs on them and there were many spirit fruits and fragrant teas on the tea table beside them. Only the top sects and factions of the North region were qualified to go up on the stone pillars. Looking down from above, it could be said to be a condescending view of the world. As for cultivators of small sects and factions or itinerant cultivators, they could only squeeze on the ground. By the time Su Zimo and the others arrived, the roofs of the restaurants near the stone platform were already filled with people on both sides of the street. Looking at the cultivators on the stone pillars who were eating spirit fruits, drinking fragrant tea and chatting happily, Yulan's eyes were filled with envy. These are all paragons of major sects and factions. If we can befriend them, there's a high chance we can even unify the North region, let alone rebuild great Yu. Yulan said softly. Su Zimo smiled and asked instead, what have you gained in the past few days? Yulan's expression darkened as she shook her head. These paragons are insufferably arrogant. Who would be willing to help without benefits? Pausing for a moment, she continued, however, it doesn't matter. If I can meet Dao Bing Wushuang, I believe that I'll definitely be able to move him. As long as he's willing to help, everything will be done. Chapter 1149. Look, Dao Bing Wind Flame is here. Dao Bing Wind Flame, the paragon of this generation's glass palace. His combat strength is only second to Dao Bing Glass back then. At the mention of Taoist glaze, the expressions of many cultivators became somewhat emotional. Unknowingly, 10 years have passed since the calamity of the title. Someone sighed softly. 10 years ago, Su Zimo fought against many titular disciples in the Dao inheritance ground and established his Dao heart. In that battle, 8 titular disciples died and it was known as the calamity of the title. Taoist glaze had perished there. Suddenly, a cultivator said, if Araki Takashi appears, the title of the number 1 Dao Being of the North region won't belong to Dao Being Wushuang, right? The Witch Gu calamity happened in the territory of the 4 dynasties. Not many people witnessed Su Zimo's 2 attacks in the capital of Great Zhou and Misty Peak. It had only been a year and the entire North region did not know that he had returned. A cultivator at the side sneered, everyone, Araki Takashi was crippled by a half-martial ancestor 10 years ago. Even if he reconstructs his body, how much combat strength can he have in the past? Another cultivator said in a deep voice, Araki Takashi has offended too many factions. It's fine if he continues to remain silent. However, if he dares to appear, countless enemies will come knocking on his door. Yu Lan was delighted when she heard the discussions around her. Although these paragons would not help her restore her empire, as long as they could get rid of Araki Takashi, they would be able to remove the greatest obstacle in her path to restoring her empire. Brother Su, did you hear that? Yu Lan rolled her eyes at Su Zimo and said proudly, Araki Takashi is not invincible. He's already at the end of his road. As long as I release the news of his return, countless paragons will naturally attack and suppress him. Su Zimo smiled indifferently and shook his head. It's useless. They're just a bunch of clay chickens and dogs. Those words sounded natural from his mouth. However, to Yulan, it sounded too arrogant. Who would dare to say that the paragons of the North region were clay chickens and dogs? Who had the qualifications to do so? Yulan frowned slightly as her impression of Su Zimo plummeted once more. Uncle Zheng, who was at the side, couldn't help but sneer. How arrogant! Why don't you give it a try in the void reversion battle later on? Let everyone see what methods you have. Not interested. Su Zimo shook his head. He was here for Dao Bing Wushuang. He could not be bothered with sparring between void reversions and Dao reversions. They were not worthy of his attention. Look at how scared you are. The mockery in Uncle Zheng's eyes intensified. Don't worry, this Dao meet is mainly for sparring. Unless there's a deep grudge, cultivators will not fight with their lives on the line. Su Zimo smiled and did not argue. In that short period of time, Dao Bing Wind Flame had already landed on the stone pillar with an indifferent expression. He did not even look at the many cultivators beneath him. He only had a single goal for coming here, to defeat Dao Bing Wushuang. Glass Palace was the only immortal sect in the North region. The title of the number 1 Dao Being of the North region had to belong to a Glass Palace cultivator. Although Dao Bing Wind Flame was alone, he occupied a stone pillar. Furthermore, no cultivator had any objections. Even the Dharma Daojun who was present had to give him face. At that moment, almost all the paragons of the various major sects and factions were gathered. Many cultivators of the Yuan clan had already arrived as well. Yuan Wushuang was the only one who did not appear. None of the cultivators present complained or were displeased. That was because this person had a noble status and it was only right for him to arrive later. After a while, a figure appeared in the distant horizon. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived above Qian Heaven City. This person was burly and wore bronze armor with a blood-red cape fluttering behind him. Beneath him was a scarlet gold lion that emitted a powerful aura. The moment this person descended, the commotion in the crowd quietened down consciously. It was as though no one dared to speak loudly for fear of offending this paragon. Dao Bing Wushuang. After Dao Bing Wushuang appeared, Dao Bing Wind Flame, who was initially resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened them with a rainbow glass glint in his eyes. At the same time, Dao Bing Wushuang looked at Dao Bing Wind Flame as well. The gazes of the two paragons collided in midair like divine weapons, causing sparks to fly. Instantly, the atmosphere turned incomparably solemn. The void between the two paragons was filled with a strong killing intent. Neither of them noticed that in the dense crowd on the street, there was a group of people staring at them with ice-cold expressions. "Is that him?" Su Zimo glanced sideways and asked the Golden Lion. The Golden Lion nodded heavily and its eyes shone with a ferocious glint as it gritted its teeth. "It's him. I'll recognize him even if he turns into ashes." "That's the cacao below?" Su Zimo's gaze landed on Yuan Wushuang's mount. The lion was scarlet gold without a single strand of impure fur and looked incomparably divine. The Golden Lion gulped with a worried expression. "First, if we fight, don't hurt the cacao." "Yes," Su Zimo nodded. At that moment, the attention of the crowd was focused on the two paragons, Dao Bing Wushuang and Dao Bing Wind Flame. Nobody heard their conversation. Dao Bing Wushuang's cultivation seems to have improved significantly. Don't worry, Dao Bing Wind Flame inherited Glass Palace and is definitely not to be trifled with. The cultivators discussed fervently. Yuan Wushuang surveyed his surroundings and declared, "Sorry for the long wait, everyone. I just had some insights and my cultivation improved. That's why I'm late." A commotion broke out in the crowd when they heard that. Dao Bing Wushuang was already at the perfected void reversion realm previously. Now that his cultivation has improved, doesn't that mean he's at the half-step Dharma characteristic realm? Who can match him among the same cultivation realm? Dao Bing Wind Flame is under immense pressure now. Dao Bing Wushuang is exerting pressure on Dao Bing Wind Flame. A cultivator could tell what was going on and said, although Dao Bing Wushuang's words seem like an explanation, they are actually meant for Dao Bing Wind Flame. At that moment, the fight between the two paragons had already begun. Everyone was watching. Yulan looked at the armored man riding a lion in midair and could not help but lament, "That's a true paragon. That's the bearing that a paragon should have." As she said that, she looked at Su Zimo. She wanted to tell Su Zimo that paragons did not rely on their words. They could attract everyone's attention the moment they appeared. When she looked at Su Zimo, she realized that the latter was pushing through the crowd and walking forward. "Brother Su, where are you going?" Yulan was stunned and asked hurriedly. To settle scores with someone, Su Zimo replied without turning back. Night Spirit, Nian Qi and the Golden Lion followed behind him with an aggressive aura and unfriendly expressions. Yulan asked instinctively, "Who are you looking for?" "Yuan Wushuang." Su Zimo's voice sounded. Yulan was stunned as she looked at the departing figure. Her impression that was gradually becoming clearer turned blurry once more. Chapter 1150. In midair, Yuan Wushuang and Dao Bing Wind Flame faced off in a tense atmosphere. Now that 3 people and a beast had barged into the middle of the battlefield, they attracted countless gazes. Even Yuan Wushuang and Dao Bing Wind Flame turned to look. The 3 people and beast walked over slowly. The leader was dressed in green robes and had delicate features. Behind him was a black-robed man with a cold expression and a golden-haired girl. At the back, a golden lion limped in. The 3 of them and the beast did not appear to be anything special. The only thing special about them was that their eyes were filled with coldness and murderous intent. Who were the 3 of them? What were they trying to do by standing out at this moment? At that moment, some cultivators in the crowd had already recognized Su Zimo and their expressions changed starkly. The pure gold lion that Yuan Wushuang was sitting on shuddered and looked at the golden lion with gentleness and worry. Suddenly, the golden lion shouted, "Cacao, I'm here to save you." "It's useless," The pure gold lion shook its head with a sorrowful expression and spoke in human language. "Lion, go back. Where did this demon beast come from? How dare you be so arrogant at the North Region Dao meet?" A cultivator of the Yuan clan had already stood out and shouted, prepared to attack and kill the golden lion on the spot. "I'll handle this matter." Yuan Wushuang raised his hand slightly and shifted his gaze to the golden lion. He smiled. "So, it's you, Fufufu. How dare you? Have you forgotten what I told you before?" Yuan Wushuang's tone was calm, but there was a hint of malevolence in his smile. "I've said that if you dare to look for me again, I'll shatter every single bone in your body bit by bit." Yuan Wushuang grinned and his tone was filled with killing intent. His attention was completely focused on the golden lion and almost did not see Su Zimo and the other two. Or rather, even if he did not care. "Crazy. He's truly crazy." Uncle Zheng shook his head. "The four of them are void reversions and they want to challenge Dao Being Wushuang?" This time, Yulan did not speak. Her eyes were fixed on Su Zimo's face, as if she wanted to see something from his face. "Yuan Wushuang." At this moment, Su Zimo spoke slowly. As soon as this name was mentioned, it caused a commotion. Yuan Wushuang was now the #1 Taoist in the North region, and his ferocious reputation was illustrious. Anyone of the same cultivation level who saw him would have to respectfully address him as Taoist Wushuang. Who dared to call him by his name? It was only now that Yuan Wushuang's gaze turned towards Su Zimo and the others. She sighed softly. "It's been many years since anyone has been so rude to me. Little Lion, the helper you found is really rude." All the cultivators present could hear the killing intent in Yuan Wushuang's tone. Many cultivators looked at Su Zimo and the others as if they were looking at a few dead people. Of course, there were also some cultivators who looked grim and bewildered as they looked at Su Zimo in disbelief. They seemed to have thought of something as their bodies trembled slightly. Su Zimo said indifferently, "What a coincidence. There aren't many people who have dared to be so rude to me all these years." That was the truth. In the Dao inheritance ground, all the cultivators who dared to attack him had already turned into cold corpses. "Yuan Wushuang, I'm here to settle 2 scores with you." Su Zimo pointed at the pure gold lion in midair. "Firstly, you shouldn't have snatched that lion to be your mount. Secondly, you shouldn't have shattered his leg." Su Zimo pointed at the golden lion again. "Ha!" Yuan Wushuang reared his head in laughter as though he had heard the funniest thing in the world. "In that case, you're here to settle scores with me?" The paragons of the other upper sects shook their heads when they heard that, feeling that it was ridiculous. A cultivator of the Yuan clan stood out and said coldly, "You're not worthy of challenging Dao Being Wushuang. Take this." The void reversion could not hold it in any longer and leaped down from the stone pillar. He withdrew a saber from his storage bag and slashed down viciously at Su Zimo's head with the power of heaven and earth. 5 dermic patterns burst forth from the saber. A perfect Dao Being dermic weapon. Before the saber descended, it burst forth with a powerful sharpness, as though it could destroy everything in front of it. Yulan's expression changed slightly. The fact that a random cultivator of the Yuan clan possessed such combat strength was proof of the strength of the 4 gentry clans. The other paragons nodded secretly as well. Coupled with dermic powers, blood chi and the aura that descended from the skies, the power of that slash was released to its limits and was not to be underestimated. Yuan Wushuang watched this scene calmly and had no intention of making a move at all. Su Zimo stood on the spot motionlessly. Even though he was enveloped by the saber aura, his expression did not change at all. His eyes were deep like an ancient well without any fluctuations. "It's over. That person has been scared silly. He has to pay the price for being arrogant." Someone sneered. All of a sudden, Su Zimo opened his mouth and spat out a single word. "Get lost." His voice was thunderous. The discussion in the crowd had just started, but it was suddenly suppressed by this loud shout, and silence was restored once again. The cultivators who were slightly closer to him were caught off guard and jumped in fright. Many cultivators felt their ears buzz and temporarily lost their hearing. They could no longer hear anything. The crowd was stunned and looked at the battlefield in a daze. Everyone found it hard to imagine that this roar actually came from the mouth of a cultivator. The void reversion of the Yuan clan was still in midair when he was suddenly struck by the sound domain. As though he was struck by lightning, his body shuddered and his gaze froze. His mind went blank and he lost consciousness, falling from midair like a meteor. The saber aura in his hand dissipated. The light on the saber dissipated as well. Bang! The void reversion fell heavily onto the stone platform and lay motionless. He had already fainted and was unconscious. Su Zimo had used the power of Thunderclap Kill for that roar. Although Qinglian's true body was nourished by the primordial divine spring, her bloodline was still not strong. If it was the true bodies of dragons, that roar alone would not have caused the void reversion to faint. Instead, his essence spirit would have been shattered and he would have died on the spot. Even so, that move was shocking enough. The initially restless crowd quietened down instantly. Who would dare to underestimate someone who could knock out a void reversion with a single roar? Who are you? Yuan Wushuang narrowed his eyes and asked slowly. Araki Takashi establishes a Tao and imparts martial arts to all living beings. Right then, a cultivator stood up slowly and glared at Su Zimo, saying slowly, Tao being Araki Takashi, you're finally out of seclusion. Pissed? Tao being Araki Takashi. Those 4 words seemed to have a magical power that caused the entire Qian Heaven City to fall silent. Yulan's mouth was agape and she felt a boom in her mind with a blank expression. How could that be? Su Zimo, he was Araki Takashi? Uncle Zheng was dumbfounded as well and could not snap out of his daze for a moment. It's him! The Prince of Great Xia seemed to have gone mad as he shouted with a terrified expression, I knew it! He must have killed the Imperial Advisor. Chapter 1151. When Yulan found out that the green-robed cultivator accompanying her along the way was Tao being Araki Takashi, many things seemed to have an explanation. Tao being Araki Takashi, the peerless paragon who once roamed the North region and suppressed countless paragons, obtaining the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking and personally bearing 8 titular disciples. The monster incarnate of history that caused many supersects to be wary of and even caused a half-martial ancestor to attack. The number 1 Tao being of Tianhuang mainland who caused the world to tremble the moment he established his Tao heart and wanted to impart martial arts to all living beings and change their fates. Everyone present knew that Su Zimo was severely injured by a half-martial ancestor expert and narrowly escaped death. His combat strength was greatly reduced and he might even have fallen from his pedestal and lost his brilliance. However, at that moment, when he appeared, many cultivators recalled the legends of Araki Takashi's miracles. Nobody could ignore his past. Araki Takashi. Just this Taoist name alone had a suffocating and irresistible force of deterrence. Yulan looked around. Some were stunned, some were wary, some were terrified and some were excited. The cultivators at the Tao meet had different expressions but everyone remained silent. There was no sound in the world. Even the wind seemed to have stopped. If the appearance of Tao being Wind Flame and Yuan Wushuang was the center of attention, she was already shocked. The appearance of Su Zimo pushed the shock in her heart to its limits. She had once said that true paragons should be the center of attention. But now, she realized that she was wrong. True paragons could intimidate everything. Tao being Araki Takashi. The weight of those 4 words caused all the cultivators to feel an omnipresent pressure. In a daze, countless doubts flashed through Yulan's mind. Why did Desolate Marshal not attack her the past few days when they traveled together? Was he wary of Uncle Zheng? Or was it because his combat strength had decreased and he was not confident? Or was there some other reason? What did the deaths of the 2 Imperial advisors have to do with Araki Takashi? Was it really like what the 2 princes said, that the 2 state teachers were killed by Araki Takashi? On the stone platform, Yuan Wushuang gradually regained his senses. After all, he was the number 1 Taoist in the North region and a genius that was hard to come by in 1,000 years. He was invincible and had never tasted defeat. He had a strong temperament, so how could he be intimidated by a Taoist name? Araki Takashi, I didn't expect it to be you. Yuan Wushuang's expression was calm as he sighed lightly. What a pity, what a pity. When your physical body is destroyed and the green lotus of creation shatters, your era has already passed. When he said this, many cultivators felt their hearts lighten. That's right. Taoist Araki Takashi is no longer the monster of the past. What do I have to be afraid of? Araki Takashi had once relied on his physical body and bloodline power the most. Now that he had reconstructed his body and lost the divine phoenix bone, what other trump cards did he have? Araki Takashi, you came at the right time. More than 100 years ago, in the Battle of the Great Qian Ruins, you killed my sect's paragon for the vermilion fruit. I'm here to settle that score with you. On the stone pillar, Dao Bing 100 Ghost of Dark Ghost Sect stood up slowly and glared at Su Zimo with a dark gaze, saying sinisterly. One of the upper sects, Dao Bing Blazing Son of Blaze Columbus Valley, suddenly burned with flames as he said in a deep voice, "You killed many disciples of my sect in the Battle of the Great Qian Ruins. It's time for you to pay with your life." One of the two swords of the North region, Dao Bing Zimu of Heavenly Piercing Sword Sect, had a sharp gaze as he suddenly said, "You killed my sect's paragon in the Great Qian Ruins. I've long wanted to test my 3-foot green sword on you." He was merely saying that casually. If this was 10 years ago, which of the paragons present would have dared to step forward and challenge Su Zimo? But now, paragons stood out one after another, glaring at Su Zimo with unfriendly expressions and murderous auras as they spouted all sorts of reasons. In reality, the paragons of Heavenly Piercing Sword Sect did not die in the hands of Su Zimo, they were killed by Dugu Jian. However, at that moment, Su Zimo was the one to blame for everything. Yuan Wushuang rode on the pure gold lion and smiled indifferently with a mocking look in his eyes. There was no need for him to make a move. Dao Bing Araki Takashi was already too busy to fend for himself. Dao Bing Wind Flame stood up slowly as well and said sternly, "Araki Takashi, you truly shouldn't have come." "You want to attack as well?" Su Zimo asked with a smile. "Dao Bing Glass died in your hands. If I kill you, I'll be the titular disciple of Glass Palace for this generation." Dao Bing Wind Flame's voice was filled with killing intent. The crowd was furious. The situation changed rapidly and Su Zimo became the target of everyone. In the crowd, Uncle Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. "Princess, you can rest assured now," Uncle Zheng whispered. "This Araki Takashi is arrogant and conceited. He doesn't know how to judge the situation. You don't have to appear and these paragons will kill him." "Yes," Yulan responded absent-mindedly. She should be happy that the greatest obstacle in her path to restoring her dynasty was about to be removed. However, for some reason, she did not feel the joy she had imagined when she saw this. There were many Dharma Daojun at the Dao meet. However, none of them stood out at that moment. Many Dao lords merely communicated with their spirit consciousnesses in secret and watched coldly from the sidelines. They knew very well that many conjoint body mighty figures attacked the Dragon Burial Valley 10 years ago. Dao Bing Araki Takashi had a Mahayana patriarch backing him. Furthermore, this patriarch had declared back then that he would not interfere in a fight between those of the same cultivation realm. However, if an expert of a sect wanted to cross a major cultivation realm and kill Araki Takashi again, this patriarch would take revenge. All we have to do is watch from the sidelines. Dao Lord Mu Yu was a Dharma characteristic expert of the Duanmu family. The Dharma characteristic expert of the Ouyang aristocratic family, by Ling Daojun, smiled indifferently. That's right. With so many void reversion paragons gathered here, Araki Takashi is definitely going to die today. In everyone's opinion, there were peerless paragons such as Yuan Wushuang and Dao Bing Wind Flame at the void reversion realm. Even if it was a series of consecutive battles, it would be enough to exhaust Su Zimo to death. On the stone platform, against the killing intent of many void reversion paragons, Su Zimo had a calm expression and said slowly, "I'm here today to look for Yuan Wushuang. It's best if unrelated people don't join in the fun." He was truly reminding them out of goodwill. He only had two motives for coming to the North Region Dao meet. One was Yuan Wushuang and the other was Xuanyu Daoren of Glass Palace. However, some people disapproved of Su Zimo's reminder. "Araki Takashi, This is the North Region Dao meet. You're not allowed to be arrogant. A void reversion stood out and strode toward Su Zimo. His eyes seemed to conjure the sun, moon and stars with a shocking aura. It's Dao being Xing Yun of Stellar Luna sect. I heard that Dao being Xing Yun is only slightly more than 100 years old and has already cultivated to the void reversion realm at such a young age. His future is limitless. Some cultivators whispered. On the stone platform, Su Zimo did not move at all and did not even look at Dao being Xing Yun. Dao being Xing Yun felt that he was being looked down upon and was enraged. Without testing, he released Stellar Luna Sect's secret skill. He wanted to release his killing move without giving Su Zimo a chance to react. A one-hit kill. The secret skill had already formed in front of Dao being Xing Yun. An ancient gigantic star spun slowly and crushed over with a powerful aura. Right then, Nian Qi turned around slowly. Chapter 1152. The gigantic star emitted a savage aura and arrived with a bang. Nian Qi strode forward without using any dermic arts. He merely gripped his fists tightly and his blood qi burst forth with streams of golden light. He clenched his fist and punched out. Against the star, Nian Qi's fist was as insignificant as a speck of dust. However, it was precisely the speck of dust that collided with this enormous star that caused a deafening explosion that shook the heavens and the earth to explode. Boom! A gigantic shockwave spread out in all directions. Nian Qi did not retreat at all and his golden hair fluttered. Crack, crack, crack. Suddenly, a series of horrifying cracking sounds could be heard on the battlefield. Under the gazes of countless people, cracks appeared on the surface of the huge planet, rapidly expanding and spreading. They filled the entire star. Bang! Immediately after, the star exploded and countless rocks formed from dermic powers flew everywhere, filling the air with dust. Blood drained from Dao being Xing Yun's face upon receiving such a severe injury. He shuddered and was sent flying, spitting out a mouthful of blood. Who do you think you are to attack my young master? Nian Qi looked at Dao being Xing Yun, who could not get up from the ground, with a dispirited expression and sneered, hollering softly. It was only at this moment that everyone's attention landed on the golden-haired girl. Prior to this, Su Zimo's appearance and Araki Takashi's name shocked everyone. Almost no one paid attention to the two people and beast beside him. It was only at this moment that everyone realized that this girl was not to be trifled with either. What surprised everyone the most was that such a beautiful and powerful girl seemed to be merely Araki Takashi's maidservant. Yulan was dumbfounded. This petite girl, who had been traveling with them all the way and looked harmless to humans and animals, had actually erupted with such terrifying power. The paragon of Stellar Luna sect could not even withstand a single move from Nian Qi. Nian Qi had the bloodline of the Protoss flowing in his body. Apart from some of the top paragons and monster incarnates, Nian Qi could sweep through almost everyone of the same cultivation realm. Not bad, not bad. Yuan Wushuang's expression was calm as he said with a smile, "Little Lion, the two helpers you found are quite strong. Yuan, you broke my leg. It's my fault for not being good enough. I admit it." The golden lion gritted its teeth and said, "As long as you return cacao to me, we will leave now." "Sure." Yuan Wushuang nodded with mockery in his eyes. "Kneel down and beg me." "Ha ha. A fiend demon actually came to our North Region Dao meet to negotiate with the number one Dao being of the North Region. What a joke." A burst of laughter came from the crowd. Night Spirit's gaze turned cold. Nian Qi also glared at him. The golden lion's expression turned menacing and there was a hint of struggle in its eyes. After a moment of silence, he finally lowered his head and limped out. "Lion, don't." The reddish-gold lion couldn't bear to see this happen. However, the moment she spoke, Yuan Wushuang sealed her words with a single thought. The reddish-gold lion had already signed a blood oath with Yuan Wushuang. Yuan Wushuang could kill the reddish-gold lion with a single thought. When he saw the golden lion's actions, the smile in Yuan Wushuang's eyes intensified. "You might have misunderstood. What I meant was that not only you, all four of you, have to kneel down and beg me." The laughter in the crowd gradually quietened down. Everyone felt their hearts skip a beat. It was as though a storm was about to descend. It was nothing much to make a demon beast kneel. However, just now Yuan Wushuang meant for Dao being Araki Takashi to kneel before him as well. 10 years ago, even the Dharma Dao Jun did not dare to make such a request in front of Dao being Araki Takashi, let alone void reversions. Very good. Ever since I became famous, no one has dared to speak to me like that. Su Zimo looked at Yuan Wushuang with a cold gaze and nodded. You're the first. But suddenly, Su Zimo opened his mouth and let out a Sanskrit sound. At the same time, an enormous golden palm appeared by Yuan Wushuang's side, and it clawed fiercely at his body. Charge! Yuan Wushuang channeled his consciousness and had the reddish gold lion carry him toward Su Zimo. Since the reddish gold lion had signed a blood oath with him, there was no way it would betray him. However, at that moment, the reddish gold lion stood motionlessly on the spot despite the danger of violating its blood oath and its bloodline reversing, causing its body to explode and die. Beast, how dare you! Yuan Wushuang was enraged. Right then, the second Sanskrit sound descended. Demon subduing seal. The third Sanskrit sound. Fiend suppression seal. 3 dermic seals and 3 Sanskrit sounds reverberated through the world. All of them enveloped Yuan Wushuang and released a suffocating attack. Initially, Yuan Wushuang wanted to use his consciousness to kill the reddish gold lion. However, under such an attack, the slightest distraction would cause him to perish. The offensive power of the 3 Daming True Sutra dermic seals coupled with the Daming mantra had already reached its limits. Yuan Wushuang did not dare to be careless as he leaped up and conjured hand seals with both hands, hollering, "Een Wind God Slash." A series of sharp saber beams formed from dermic powers burst forth from his body. They were bedazzling and sliced open the 3 golden palms that enveloped him. Yuan Wushuang roared and withdrew a gigantic axe from his storage bag, slashing down viciously. Boom! The golden Buddha palm shattered into specks of golden light. Just as Yuan Wushuang was about to make a move, Su Zimo's attack descended once more like a torrential storm, not giving him any chance to catch his breath. An incomparably blazing sword chi burst forth and filled the world with a white blur. Stars appeared in the firmaments in a chaotic manner. The killing intent of the heavens shifted the stars. Heaven-slaying sword chi. This was the most terrifying killing move among Su Zimo's many dermic arts. Given his current cultivation, he could release 3 sword chi consecutively. However, Su Zimo did not release all of them at once. The killing power of the 3 sword chi was way too terrifying. He was worried that he would kill Yuan Wushuang directly. Yuan Wushuang had signed a blood oath with the reddish gold lion. If he was killed directly, the reddish gold lion's essence spirit would be severely injured as well. Furthermore, even if he killed Yuan Wushuang directly, he might not be able to free the golden lion from its mental demons. After the heaven-slaying sword chi appeared, all the cultivators were shocked. Even many Dharma Dao Jun were moved, let alone the void reversions present, with wary looks in their eyes. The sharpness of the sword chi even made them feel threatened. What a terrifying sword chi! To think that Araki Takashi's dermic arts would be so terrifying. Oomph! Suddenly, a cultivator sneered, "All of you think that Araki Takashi's combat strength has decreased greatly after losing his physical body. However, there's something you might not know." What? Someone could not help but ask. The cultivator said sternly, "In the battle of the Dao inheritance ground back then, Araki Takashi had demon blood flowing in his veins and the divine phoenix bone in his body. His physique and bloodline were suppressed. 10 years ago, this cultivator had entered the Dao inheritance ground and witnessed the battles with his own eyes." What does that mean? The cultivators at the side still did not understand. The cultivator said slowly, "This means that Araki Takashi did not use his body or bloodline to kill the 8 titular disciples back then. You guys think that his physique and bloodline are strong and invincible in melee combat. However, you don't know that Araki Takashi's dermic arts are also strong enough to look down on his peers and destroy everything." Chapter 1153. Yuan Wushuang swung the gigantic axe in his hands and had just charged forward when his vision was shrouded by a bedazzling light. An extremely sharp edge was coming straight at his face. Before the edge truly descended, he already felt as though his body was about to be torn into two. Ah! Yuan Wushuang reared his head and roared as the blood qi in his body burst forth completely. His bloodline rumbled and spewed out. Although the strength of his blood qi had not reached the level of tsunami blood, it was only a step away and could be considered top-notch. Yuan Wushuang gripped his gigantic axe tightly and released his blood qi. Dermic powers surged within his body and his black hair danced. Narrowing his eyes, he slashed viciously towards the incoming sword qi. The heaven-slaying sword qi had already forced out all his strength. Right then, Su Zimo slapped his storage bag and removed a dark gray mountain peak, throwing it towards Yuan Wushuang. It was the ancient unique treasure, the Mystic Magnet Mountain. When the Mystic Magnet Mountain was first taken out, it was only the size of a palm and could be supported with a single palm. However, as Su Zimo injected dermic powers, the Mystic Magnet Mountain expanded rapidly against the wind and turned into a mountain in the blink of an eye. The larger the Mystic Magnet Mountain, the stronger the magnetic power it emitted. Given Su Zimo's current cultivation, he could raise the Mystic Magnet Mountain to 100 feet tall if he channeled it with all his might. Although it was far from a true mountain peak, the sudden descent of the 100 feet tall mountain peak was shocking enough as well. Yuan Wushuang wielded his gigantic axe and could have initially slashed against the heaven-slaying sword qi. However, due to the appearance of the Mystic Magnet Mountain, it released a powerful magnetic power that pulled his gigantic axe away from its original trajectory. Yuan Wushuang's blood qi was strong and he could maintain his stability even with the suction of the Mystic Magnet Mountain. However, the gigantic axe in his hand moved a small distance and just happened to cross paths with the heaven-slaying sword qi that slashed over. Although it seemed like a millimeter difference, it could determine the life and death of this battle. Yuan Wushuang's expression changed starkly. In a flash, he made the most correct choice. He abandoned the gigantic axe in his hands. This giant axe was his natal celestial weapon. In his hands, it could unleash an extremely powerful destructive force. However, under the envelopment of the Mystic Magnet Mountain, his destiny dermic weapon became a burden. He did not have the time to block the heaven-slaying sword qi. With a thought from Yuan Wushuang, the gigantic axe transformed into a stream of light and was stuffed back into his storage pouch. At the same time, he formed hand seals with his left hand while his right hand took out a few talismans from his storage bag and tore them apart. Layers of defensive barriers were formed in front of him, wanting to block the sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword qi. However, these talismans were like a layer of window paper in front of the heaven-slaying sword qi, being pierced through one after another. 6 trigram Dharma Mirror. Taking advantage of this delay, Yuan Wushuang's spell had already been condensed. A scarlet gold circular mirror appeared in his palm. Mysterious patterns were etched on it and it spun continuously, emitting a blazing glow. These successive responses displayed Yuan Wushuang's extremely powerful combat strength, keen combat talent, and brilliant combat skills. He was indeed worthy of being called the #1 Taoist in the northern region. However, Yuan Wushuang's rise was too short. At the very most, it had only been 10 years. What happened 10 years ago? The 8 titular disciples, the strongest void reversions in Tianhuang mainland, were all killed by Su Zimo in the Dao inheritance ground. The biggest reason why Yuan Wushuang could rise was because Dao Being Glass died in the hands of Su Zimo. In other words, if Dao Being Glass was still around, Yuan Wushuang might not have been able to stand out. But after 10 years, Su Zimo, who had once killed 8 titular disciples in the Dao inheritance ground, had become even stronger and the killing power of the heaven-slaying sword qi was even stronger. Clang. The heaven-slaying sword qi broke through 3 defensive barriers and struck the center of the 6 trigram Dharma mirror. Crack, crack, crack. Accompanied by a series of cracking sounds, cracks appeared on the 6 trigram Dharma mirror and filled the entire mirror in the blink of an eye. Yuan Wushuang's expression changed. The killing power of the sword chi was too strong and it broke through 3 of his defensive talismans and a defensive dermic art. However, the remnant sharpness did not stop. There was no need for more. 2 consecutive sword chi would be enough to kill him here. Yuan Wushuang felt a tremendous pressure that suffocated him. It was as though all his methods were useless against Araki Takashi. Araki Takashi had reconstructed his body and the power of his physique and bloodline was definitely his weakness. Yuan Wushuang wanted to close the distance right away and fight Su Zimo in melee combat. However, he could not get close at all. The sword chi pierced through the 6 trigram Dharma mirror. Yuan Wushuang wanted to retreat and dodge, but it was too late. Blood flashed. Yuan Wushuang's palm was pierced by the heaven-slaying sword chi. The killing power contained in the sword chi spread rapidly along the wound, destroying all life in the palm. On the surface, it looked like there was only a bloody hole in Yuan Wushuang's palm. However, in the blink of an eye, the meridians and blood vessels in the palm ruptured and the life within was destroyed by the heaven-slaying sword chi. The palm was crippled. The sword chi did not stop and pierced towards Yuan Wushuang's chest. Clang. The sword chi landed on the armor on his body and emitted a burst of fire before finally dissipating. The cultivators were dumbfounded. Throughout the entire process, everyone was so nervous that they even forgot to breathe. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they saw the sword chi dissipate. Even bystanders felt such pressure against the heaven-slaying sword chi, let alone Yuan Wushuang, who was enveloped by the sword chi. A few drops of sweat had already appeared on his forehead. The armor on his body was also a Khanate Dao being dermic weapon. However, the remnant sword chi still left a clear white mark on his armor. Just now, he would have been defeated and severely injured by the sword chi if not for the protection of the armor. Yuan Wushuang had a lingering fear after escaping the calamity and relaxed slightly. However, he did not expect that Su Zimo would not give him a chance to catch his breath. 6 trigram dermic mirror. The moment the sword chi dissipated, Su Zimo charged forward and extended his arm, pointing at Yuan Wushuang and hollering, "Kill! Thunderclap kill!" A sound domain secret skill was released. If it was a normal battle, given Yuan Wushuang's blood chi and physique, he might not be affected by Thunderclap kill. However, at that moment, he was at his most relaxed state and was suddenly struck by Thunderclap kill. His entire body shuddered and his mind went blank. The moment Thunderclap kill descended, a gigantic lightning pillar descended above his head. It curved and coiled with lightning as it struck Yuan Wushuang's head. Sniff. Thunder exploded. The fusion of the Purple Thunder Manual and Green Thunder Manual to form the Great Void Spirit Refinement section was one of the dermic arts, Fury of Thunder. Although Yuan Wushuang's armor could defend against the sharpness of dermic weapons, it could not defend against the impact of Fury of Thunder. Thunderclap kill and Fury of Thunder descended at the same time and Yuan Wushuang was struck silly. Smoke billowed from his body and his hair curled. His gaze was blank and he was motionless. Chapter 1154. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already arrived beside Yuan Wushuang. With a wave of his hand, he captured her essence spirit and gathered it in his palm. Victory was decided. The crowd was in an uproar. From the moment Su Zimo attacked to the end of the battle, only more than 10 breaths had passed. No one had expected that this battle would end in such a short time. The number 1 perfected being of the North region could not resist at all against Su Zimo and her essence spirit was captured. Su Zimo's series of attacks were the top dermic arts of the immortal and Buddhist Daos. It was already rare for Yuan Wushuang to be able to break free from the impact of the 3 Daming dermic seals and defend against the sharpness of the heaven-slaying sword chi. If it was any other paragon, they might not even be able to defend against the 3 Daming dermic seals. Yulan's heart skipped a beat when she saw that with a conflicted expression. Probably no one could understand what she was feeling right now. The reason why she came this time round was to invite Yuan Wushuang to suppress Araki Takashi. However, she did not expect that in less than 10 breaths, Yuan Wushuang's essence spirit would be captured by Araki Takashi and her life would be out of her control. That was truly ridiculous. What was even more ridiculous was that the Tao being Araki Takashi that she wanted to suppress was Su Zimo who was with her. Uncle Zheng sighed faintly and said softly, "Princess, it seems like your hunchback then was right. This person is indeed not simple." Yu Lan smiled bitterly without saying anything. Her first impression of Su Zimo when she saw him was that he was special and not simple. That was the reason why she invited him over to befriend him. However, she had not expected him to be so special. The entire battle ended too quickly. Even many Dharma Daojun could not react in time, let alone the void reversions present. Araki Takashi, stop. A Dharma Daojun of the Yuan clan stood up and frowned, saying in a deep voice, "Araki Takashi, this is the North Region Dao meet. Everyone is just exchanging pointers and not fighting to the death." Not bad. In the Duanmu family, Dao Lord Muyu nodded and said loudly, "Araki Takashi, the outcome has been decided. Let him go." "Can't fight to the death?" Su Zimo sneered and said indifferently, "I came to the North Region Dao meet to settle scores with him. Do you think I'll let him go just because you said so?" Presently, Yuan Wushuang's origin spirit was in Su Zimo's palm. Su Zimo could annihilate Yuan Wushuang with a single thought. Even if the Dharma Daojun present had the intention to make a move to save him, he was also wary of taking action for fear of breaking the vases. "Araki Takashi, let's make a deal." Yuan Wushuang judged the situation. When he saw that he could not escape, he said in a deep voice, "If you kill me, the essence spirit of this scarlet gold lion will be severely injured as well. How about I break the blood oath with her and you release me?" The golden lion's heart skipped a beat and he hesitated. If he could exchange for Cacao safety, he would be willing to exchange his life for Yuan Wushuang's release, let alone Yuan Wushuang. Although his leg was shattered by Yuan Wushuang, as long as Cacao was fine, this suffering was nothing. However, now that Su Zimo was in control of the situation, he could not say anything. He merely looked at the scarlet gold lion with a worried expression. "All right." As though he could sense the golden lion's intentions, Su Zimo pondered for a moment before nodding. "Break the blood oath and I'll spare your life." "That won't do. You have to swear a Dao oath. What if you go back on your word?" Yuan Wushuang was still worried. "I said that I'll spare your life, so I won't kill you." Su Zimo's expression turned cold as he exerted strength in his palm and squeezed Yuan Wushuang's essence spirit, saying coldly, "Don't push your luck." "All right." Yuan Wushuang could sense the killing intent in Su Zimo's heart and did not dare to make any more requests. He chanted a mental cultivation technique and a drop of soul blood floated out of his consciousness. It was in the shape of a lion and emitted a faint demonic chi as it flew towards the scarlet gold lion. The scarlet gold lion had an excited expression and hurried forward. When the drop of soul blood returned to her body shuddered and the invisible shackles that shrouded her were suddenly released. Delighted, the scarlet gold lion reared her head and roared, sprinting towards the golden lion. After 9 years, they were finally reunited. Their foreheads were pressed tightly together. The two lions were motionless and silent, merely looking at each other affectionately with tears in their eyes. Many cultivators were moved when they saw that. Although these were only two demonic beasts, at this moment, many cultivators could feel the joy and emotion of this reunion. Everything had a spirit and emotions. Demons were the same. Nianqi smiled. Even the night spirit's eyes flashed with an imperceptible gentleness. "Araki Takashi, why aren't you letting go of me?" Yuan Wushuang hollered. Su Zimo released his grip. Yuan Wushuang's essence spirit transformed into a streak of light and entered his glabella, returning to his consciousness to regain control of his body. Endless indignance and resentment surged in his heart. Prior to this, he was the #1 Dao being of the North region and his reputation had already reached its peak. No one of the same cultivation realm could compare to him. However, in just more than 10 breaths, all of his glory and past was shattered by this green-robed cultivator before him. "I can't let this matter rest just like that." Yuan Wushuang lowered his head slightly and glanced at Su Zimo who was standing not far away from him. Suddenly, a bold thought popped into his mind. Previously, he wanted to think of ways to engage in melee combat with Su Zimo but to no avail. But now, the two of them were less than an arm apart. Wasn't this a godsend opportunity? If he were to suddenly attack and kill Dao being Araki Takashi here, it would be nothing even if he was defeated just now. Although this method was dishonorable, it would be worth it as long as he could kill Dao being Araki Takashi. His reputation would not decrease. Instead, it would rise once more. The moment that thought flashed through his mind, it could no longer be suppressed and grew wildly. Yuan Wushuang felt his heart thumping wildly. Steady. Yuan Wushuang took a deep breath of air and tried his best to stabilize his emotions. He did not look at Su Zimo, afraid that he would alert the latter and fail at the last step. All of a sudden, without any warning, Yuan Wushuang raised his head and his eyes shone with a cold glint. With a roar, he lunged towards Su Zimo. However, the moment he raised his head, his heart skipped a beat. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had already turned around and was looking at him with a fake smile. That pair of deep eyes seemed to have seen through all his thoughts long ago. Not good. Yuan Wushuang was alarmed. He was prepared. Right then, a demonic glint flashed through Su Zimo's eyes. His pupils were pitch black, as though they were emitting a strange demonic power. Yuan Wushuang was stunned. When he exchanged glances with those demonic eyes, his mind went into a daze. His movement technique, speed, and hand movements all slowed down. However, Yuan Wushuang snapped back to his senses before long. Visual technique. His heart skipped a beat and he revealed an opening. Su Zimo's visual technique took advantage of it and affected his mind. Yuan Wushuang's heart gradually sank. Although he snapped back to his senses quickly and was only dazed for a moment, it was enough for him to do anything against an opponent of Araki Takashi's level. There was already a palm on the top of his head. It was Araki Takashi's palm. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.